Much like the Age of Apocalypse and the Onslaught sagas, X-Cutioner's song took X-Men fans on a wild ride. This time around, Professor X had been shot. Apocalypse was doing his own thing, but the one who made everyone's lives hell was Strife, an uber-powerful mutant clone and the big bad of X-Cutioner's song. He wanted revenge against Jean and Cyclops, as well as Apocalypse, because he thought these three were responsible for his dark childhood. In this long read, we'll explore the entire event, diving into the adventures of X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, Cable, and Strife, the mutant supremacist and anarchist. Prelude. Before we get started, let's catch up on the X-Men. And they've been through a lot, especially Angel, who's now known as Archangel. He now has a new outlook on life after he was betrayed by Cameron Hodge, his close friend. This cost Angel his wings, but there was someone who could help him, someone Warren wasn't keen on. Apocalypse. Apocalypse gave Angel new wings, metallic and poisonous wings, giving us Archangel, the blue-skinned metal-winged warrior, in the process of transforming him into Apocalypse's new horseman, Death. During this time, he was brainwashed by Apocalypse to serve him. He managed to accomplish a lot, and even defeated and captured X-Factor during this stint. This is what forced his longtime friend, Bobby, aka Iceman, to do something about it. Iceman faked his death by making a face ice sculpture of himself, and when Archangel destroyed it, he was jolted back to reality, no longer keen on serving Apocalypse. As for the rest of the X-Men, Jean, Cyclops, Beast, Angel, and Iceman are back after branching off of their own adventures for a short stint. Jean and Cyclops had a baby boy named Nathan, but dread soon followed as he was infected with a technorganic virus by Apocalypse. This forced Cyclops and Jean to send their son into the future as a last resort, with a mysterious woman named Mother Ascani, who offered her help to the two. This filled Cyclops with rage, who avenged his son by seemingly killing Apocalypse in a battle to the death. Despite having avenged his son, his heart still aches for son Nathan, who's been lost to the future. With the growing number of X-Men in mind, Charles divided the X-Men into two teams, Gold and Blue. You may have seen these teams on several occasions, the latest being X-Men 97's 9th episode, where one team goes to tackle Magneto, while the other goes to fight Bastion and his Sentinels. Anyway, coming back to our story, Storm, Colossus, Iceman, Archangel, and Jean Grey make up the Gold team, while Cyclops, Gambit, Wolverine, Beast, Psylocke, Rogue, and Jubilee make up the Blue team. Meanwhile, the new mutants are now all grown up, and they now go by the name X-Force. Mentored by Cable, the X-Force consists of Cannonball, Feral, Sunspot, Shatterstar, Warpath, Siren, and Boom Boom, who was actually going by the name Boomer during this time. Another team we need to focus on is the X-Factor, a government-sanctioned mutant team that was tasked to hunt mutants that broke the law. This team consists of Multiple Man, Strong Guy, Wolf's Bane, Havoc, Polaris, and Quicksilver. In the recent weeks, tragedy has befallen every X-Men. Cyclops has become attracted to Psylocke in his heart, and Jean can sense it telepathically, which has only strained their relationship further after Nathan was sent to the future. Forge walked back on his marriage proposal to Storm and left the X-Men. Gambit's ex-wife Belladonna Boudreaux resurfaced, only to be tragically killed a few days later. Colossus's brother Mikhail killed himself, and Wolverine was forced to leave his fiancée, Mariko Yoshida, after she was poisoned. Now that we've established the prerequisite, let's dive into the super magnificent X-Cutioner's song event. Uncanny X-Men number 294, Overture. We start our story in the Grand Hyatt Hotel in the Big Apple, the current temporary residence of the X-Factor, courtesy of the US government. The room is filled with cheers as multiple dupes of Jamie Madrox perform the conga, while the original sits on the sofa, along with Strong Guy and Quicksilver, staring intently at the TV. Lila Cheney, a hidden mutant and world-renowned rock star, is performing a free concert at Central Park, and nobody wants to miss out on it. Strong Guy is nervously chewing on his popcorn, getting irritated by Multiple Man and his duplicate's antics with each passing second. Multiple Man, aka Jamie Madrox, is a powerful mutant with the power of kinetic duplication. He creates duplicates of himself whenever he's hit, and so do his duplicates. Each duplicate has its own personality, and Jamie can control up to 40 duplicates currently. If he produces more than 40 duplicates, he'll lose control over the older ones. Strong Guy's resolve finally breaks when Jamie brings up the sensitive matter of how Strong Guy is no longer Lila's bodyguard. He hits Madrox on the head and carries the TV into his room while shutting the door behind him. Meanwhile, back at Central Park, we get to see the real reason Lila is doing a free concert. It's Professor X, and he wants to give a speech on mutant and human harmony. Mutants aren't loved by humans, especially since the Age of Apocalypse saga, and thus the professor hopes his speech can help change a few minds. Lila finishes her song and introduces Charles to the crowd. This, however, doesn't sit well with them. The whole crowd erupts with anger as boos echo throughout Central Park. "Give him a chance! Let him speak!" says one. "Shoot the mutant-loving gimp and the chair he rode in on," says another. On the other side of town, in Harry's hideout, Salem Center, Jean and Cyclops are enjoying a beautiful date as they finally manage to get some time to themselves. Jean's been worried about their relationship considering the recent breakup of Storm and Forge, and Cyclops says, "Afraid? Afraid is good. Unlike Forage, I have everything I need, everything I've ever needed, right here in my arms. He pulls her close to him and plants a kiss on her lips. This beautiful moment, however, is short-lived as the wall of the diner comes crumbling down with a loud crash, and in comes Caliban, leaping through the air. He looks different, because he's been changed by Apocalypse, as he now serves as one of his horsemen as Death. People rush out of Harry's hideout, which catches Bobby Drake and Pieter's attention. They were out shopping for groceries as they realized Jean and Scott could be in mortal danger. The two transform into their superhero personas, Iceman and Colossus, but are soon stopped in the tracks by Apocalypse's other two horsemen, Famine and War. The fight on the outside of the diner mimics what's going on inside, and it's not looking good. Caliban's recent transformation has rendered him impervious to Scott's optic blasts, and his resentment for the X-Men has fueled him enough that Jean is barely able to hold him in telekinetic grip. The new horseman leaps through the air and lands on Scott and Jean, pinning them to the ground. He then breaks a support pillar with a single punch, which brings the roof crashing down on them. Things on the outside seem to be going in favor of the X-Men as Famine comes crumbling down like a skeleton. She tried to use her emaciation power on Colossus, who's impervious to her powers when he's transformed. This caused her powers to feed on herself, reducing her to nothing but a pile of bones. That must have hurt. Back in Central Park, the incessant barrage of the crowd on Charles continues. However, this only intensifies his resolve further. He goes on to deliver a hard-hitting speech regarding harmony between humans and mutant kind. He tries to appeal to everyone how harsh words can impact someone's psyche, how words like freak, flat scan, dead end, gene joke, and more can alienate a minority like mutants. Among the crowd are his X-Men, Archangel, Storm, Gambit, Rogue, and Bishop, all of whom are deeply affected by the incessant cries and abuse hurled at the Professor. But then silence takes over the crowd as a loud bang echoes through the air, and a bullet whizzes past the X-Men and lodges itself straight into Charles Xavier's chest. The Professor has been shot, and the culprit is Cable. "Cable!" screams Archangel as he transforms and takes flight, heading for the man from the future that just shot the Professor. But Cable's come prepared, and he shoots his plasma rifle at Archangel, hitting his wings, impeding his ability to fly. Storm and Bishop rush toward the stage as a horrified Lila Cheney holds the Professor in her arms. Archangel is closing in on Cable in the background, but he uses his bodyslide teleporter to vanish into thin air. It's all over. Cable is gone, and the Professor is dying. And while this is disastrous, what's happened at Harry's hideout will only make things worse. Despite Colossus and Iceman's best efforts, Caliban has managed to kidnap Jean and Scott by the time they manage to defeat War and Famine. Harry's hideout has been reduced to nothing but rubble, and so has Colossus and Iceman's resolve as they realize War and Famine were just a distraction. Across the country in New Mexico is X-Force. Warpath, Boomer, Sunspot, and Richter are huddled around a makeshift campfire as they have their dinner. Sunspot's real name is Roberto DaCosta, and he's a mutant with the power of absorbing solar radiation and using it to his advantage. He can also fly, has superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, and durability. He also has the power of thermokinesis, photokinesis, and can survive on his own in deep space when he's transformed. If you've been hooked onto X-Men 97 like we are, then you might have spotted him in the show. His first appearance on the big screen was in the 20th Century Fox movie X-Men Days of the Future Past, and joining Sunspot in the movie was also Warpath, someone we see here alongside him. Warpath, aka James Proudstar, is a mutant with superhuman abilities, the power of flight and regenerative healing factor. He also has shamanic abilities thanks to his Apache Indian background. It's a shame that despite their extensive portfolio of powers and comic book appearances, they never appeared in more movies. Let's get familiar with Boomer and Richter as well while we're at it. Boomer's real name is Tabitha Smith, and although she currently goes by the name Boomer, she'll later go on to call herself Boom Boom. She's a mutant with the power to create plasma bombs at will. She can hurl them in any direction and calls them time bombs. Richter, aka Julio Richter, is a mutant with the power to manipulate the Earth's energy. This grants him superhuman abilities like geokinesis, seismokinesis, magmakinesis, and more. He's clairvoyant and also has the power of mysticism. As these members of the X-Force have their dinner, Cannonball and Siren desperately try to get a signal on the makeshift TV, a TV that they've clearly put together using scrap. Cannonball's real name is Sam Guthrie, and he has the power of thermochemical energy field propulsion, which allows him to propel himself through the air and maneuver effortlessly, and he's the interim leader of the X-Force in Cable's absence. Siren's real name is Teresa Cassidy, and as the name suggests, she has the power of sonic screams, using which she can also fly and create shields, lances, and more. The two of them finally manage to get the TV working, and it seems their rough time is about to get a lot worse. Each member stares at the screen in horror as they realize the Professor has been shot, and the assassin is none other than their missing mentor, Cable, something that shocks the X-Force as much as it did the X-Men. X-Factor 84, Tough Love. The recent attempt on Charles's life by Cable strains the already struggling X-Force. They know they have to go after Cable, but going to New York is suicide. They've been on the run from the X-Men, and the city will be crawling with every mutant under their wing looking for clues. Warpath and Shatterstar argue about the trip while their leader Cannonball contemplates away from the group in the background. Shatterstar's real name is Gavidra 7, and his existence is intertwined with temporal paradoxes. When it comes to his powers, Shatterstar has superhuman abilities, the power of regeneration, as well as the ability to create portals and generate shockwaves. He's a master swordsman as well as a master strategist. As the X-Force continues to argue, they also worry about IPAC, that interpersonal assault carrier that they stole from S.H.I.E.L.D. It's in rough shape, and if they decide to go and something happens, it isn't exactly a reliable getaway vehicle. Sunspot finally chimes in and says, "Sam, you're the leader. What do you think?" Cannonball turns around and says, "I say we go. We owe it to Cable to rein him in if he's nuts, and if he's hurt the professor, we owe it to Xavier. But you're staying here, Birdo." Roberto, aka Sunspot, protests, but his protest is quickly shot down by Sam considering his current condition. Roberto needs to rest, so he can help them when he's actually needed. Sam's gonna take Richter, Boomer, and Feral with him to New York while the rest stay behind and monitor the situation. They'll be responsible for breaking them out in case they get captured. Back in New York, Xavier has been rushed to the nearest hospital, and accompanying him are Bishop, Havoc, Wolfsbane, and Valerie Cooper. Rain, aka Wolfsbane, is on the edge, and her emotions break through when she's stopped from going into the operating room and she screams at the nurses stopping her. Val and Alex desperately pull her away as she tries to scratch and claw at the nurses. They can't let her show her emotions. With her outbursts, it'd make it pretty easy for anyone to put 2 and 2 together and figure out that Xavier's a mutant. Storm and Bishop have been sitting in the waiting area as Alex, Rain, and Val join them. Alex wishes they could have met under better circumstances, and Aurora agrees. Xavier's assassination isn't exactly the reunion any of them had expected. Aurora tells Havoc that the rest of the X-Men are on their way, and when she inquires about the rest of the X-Factor team, Alex tells her about the assault on a young mutant yesterday. The rest of the X-Factor is keeping him company in the same hospital upstairs. And as we move up, we find out that it's one of the expatriates, Taylor, that was beaten by humans that hate mutants. Expatriates are a group of mutants that escaped Genosha seeking asylum in America, but it seems things are only worse here. Quicksilver hates to agree, especially because it's his father Magneto's views that he's propagating. The fastest man on Earth says, "I was there when Xavier and my father, Magneto, first butted heads over humanity. How nauseating to think Magneto's view seems borne out. It's clear that many of them are on the fence regarding their views on mutants, especially now after the recent attack on Taylor and Professor Xavier." Polaris tries to interject and make everybody realize that it isn't humans versus mutants. Polaris is Magneto's daughter who joined the X-Men after she was rescued by them and later goes on to join the X-Factor. Her real name is Lorna Dane, and Polaris has the power to manipulate magnetic fields. This grants her the ability of magnetic force fields, magnetic flight, electromagnetic sight, energy absorption, metal manipulation, and more. Polaris's words only anger Prodigal further as he stares at his injured teammate covered in bandages. "I see, Ms. Dane. Human brutality towards mutants is acceptable because it's equitable." He's twisting and misunderstanding what Polaris is trying to say, but he's too angry to understand as he continues to say, "No, it's not. And how much more do we take? Until we start letting people know that we'll take no more." Downstairs in the hospital where Xavier is being treated, Strong Guy and Pirouette, aka Joe Beth, the fourth member of the expatriates, make their appearance. They're very late. It's 2 a.m. and Havoc isn't happy about it one bit, especially after knowing that Guido had turned his headset off. When asked about it, Joe Beth takes the blame for it, and it's revealed to everyone that the two have started dating each other. Rain, meanwhile, has been growing angrier and angrier by the second as they have no update on Xavier's health. To calm her nerves and maybe help her use her energy for something productive, Alex asks her to go to Central Park where the professor was shot and search for clues. Her super senses can help her find something others might have missed, and he asks Guido, aka Strong Guy, to accompany her. "Why me?" asks Guido nonchalantly, and Alex turns to him, seething with anger, and says, "Because I ordered you to, cupcake." It's the nickname Joe Beth uses for Guido, and he shuffles out of the hospital with Rain the very next moment. Archangel, meanwhile, contemplates and flies through the night as he lands atop the hospital's roof. He's facing too many internal conflicts. Archangel had hoped his new wings, courtesy of Apocalypse, would have helped him, but Cable's gun was able to shoot right through them. Overcome by his internal conflicts, the winged mutant screams, "First, we nail Cable, and after we do, it's gonna be you, Apocalypse, you and me. Nothing will save you when that happens. Nothing." Now, let's catch up with Guido and Rain. They've reached Central Park, and Rain is trying to isolate Cable's scent, but something's amiss. She seems to be able to isolate a familiar scent, but is being impeded by all the spores in the air. This is when Guido spots the iPac descending from the sky, and he bolts with Rain to safety out of sight. And as the iPac lands, they watch Feral and Shatterstar step out of the shadows. The two of them begin to look for clues, unaware of Guido and Rain's presence behind them. Strong Guy uses his radio to contact Alex back at the hospital to inform him of X-Force's sudden appearance. Alex just can't believe his luck. He'd sent out Rain on a small job to calm her nerves, and she's now hit the jackpot by running into the X-Force. He asks if Cable's present with them, and Aurora and Bishop quickly perk up, listening intently with every intention of going after Cable in case he's with the X-Force. Alex, however, quickly shoots down their plans of leaving the hospital as they need someone to protect the Professor in case Cable tries another assassination attempt. He orders Guido and Rain to stay out of sight as he plans to reach there with the X-Factor as soon as possible. But Rain has other plans. Before Guido can relay Alex's orders, she's leapt out of the cover and is making her way towards the X-Force. Well, after all, you can't blame her. They're her old friends. Sam orders Feral to let Rain pass through as she leaps into his arms and gives him a tight hug.
Sam, I can't believe it. I thought you were dead.
Sam can't help but smile as she goes in to hug Boomer next. That's until she hears Richter speak to her. Richter, Rain's old flame, and she instantly goes in for a kiss as soon as she hears his voice. But she's too primal and ends up biting him on the lips. Feral's growing tired of this mushy reunion as she tries to get over this mess by searching for Cable's scent. But things are only getting started as Strong Guy calls them out from behind. Only place you're getting kids is up against the ship. Come on, spread 'em. I'm a government rep, and you bozos are wanted big time. Shatterstar isn't impressed and calls Guido a traitor for helping the government apprehend his own kind. Rain is on Guido's side as she requests Sam and the others to turn themselves in, but it isn't gonna be this easy.
You owe that killer nothing. You'll be well treated, I promise you,
says Rain, but Sam isn't having any of it. After all, Cable's one of them, and they've always looked after each other. That's what X-Force is all about. Sam says, what if I said I'd have X-Force surrender? If you agreed to leave X-Factor and join us instead, if we're kicked loose later. And this saddens Rain. She can't do this. Sam knows she loves Havoc. They've been through this before. And thus Sam makes his point. You don't trust us is what it is. And trust has got to work both ways, Rain. Otherwise, it's nothing. Richter, in the background, isn't pleased when he hears about Rain's love for Alex. Meanwhile, Feral informs him that she can't pick up Cable's scent and so asks Cannonball to leave immediately before things take a turn for the worse. But Guido isn't having any of it. He can't allow the X-Force to escape. He grabs Feral by the tail and yanks it to stop her from getting away. The next moment, Guido gets his chest slashed and kicked in the face by Shatterstar, who isn't pleased one bit. Guido throws a punch at him, but the sword-wielding mutant is too quick for Strong Guy as he backflips away. Rain and Feral growl at each other like wildcats getting ready for a showdown as Boomer looks on in horror with Sam in the background. The next moment, Rain thrusts her claws into Feral, which sends her flying away, but things aren't going this good for Guido. Shatterstar is besting him in every way possible. He kicks Strong Guy in the chin and then brings his blade down on his chest in full force. Guido screams in terror and looks down, expecting the sword to have gone through him. But he's fine. How? Looking for this, a voice comes from behind them and Shatterstar turns around to see Quicksilver standing there with his sword. Stealing his sword is the kind of disrespect Shatterstar cannot tolerate, and he leaps at Quicksilver wielding his other sword. Shatterstar is quick, but he's no match for the fastest man on Earth. Things aren't looking good for Feral either, because as she lands a bite on Rain's arm, Rain angrily bites the back of her neck. Holy cow! Rain's gonna kill her! I gotta! Says Cannonball as he flies toward the two, but he's soon blasted away by a beam of plasma. Boomer and the rest turn around and see that it's Alex and Polaris, on top of the X-Factor plane piloted by Multiple Man. Richter hates Alex, and thus he uses his powers to destabilize the craft. Jamie desperately tries to keep it under control, but the plane begins losing altitude quickly. Polaris does her best to use her magnetic waves to cushion the impact, and it's just enough to help the three of them escape the plummeting craft before it crashes into the ground. Richter is smirking and is quite pleased with himself, but he fails to notice Guido approaching in the background. Strong Guy picks up Richter and throws him away the next moment, unaffected by his seismo waves as he can absorb kinetic energy. Shatterstar, meanwhile, has been trying to desperately land a hit on Quicksilver, unaware how easy it is for Peter to dodge his attacks. He calls Peter a coward for dodging his attacks, and this angers Quicksilver a lot as he quips back, "The worst thing you could do is merit my full attention. My entire life consists of finding ways to ease my boredom, which you're currently doing. But you're coming dangerously close to crossing the line into the realm of being an annoyance." In the air, Cannonball has managed to find his footing and is flying above the ongoing fights. Havoc and Polaris' recent fall has left them shaken up, and this is the perfect opportunity to take them down before they can overpower the X-Force. With this in mind, Sam propels towards them but is hit by Polaris' magnetic wave, which holds him in place. Although Havoc needs some time to get ready to use his plasma beams again, Polaris is more than capable of taking care of Cannonball at this moment. She waits for Alex to gather his bearings while holding Sam immobile in the air, but they both have left themselves vulnerable to Boomer, who conjures a large plasma sphere and hurls it toward them. The sphere explodes with a large boom, causing Polaris to lose a grip on Cannonball, and he makes a hasty escape. Multiple Man isn't pleased with Boomer's sneak attack as he runs towards her, but in the dark of the night, Boomer can't see who it is as she hurls another plasma sphere at him. And as the sphere nears Multiple Man, Boomer realizes her mistake, but it's too late already. The impact causes Multiple Man to create 5 more duplicates of himself, and together they'll easily overpower the young mutant. Sam has had enough. They all seem to be losing, and he doesn't plan on being captured by the X-Men. Well, not today. He breaks the fight between Quicksilver and Shatterstar by blasting Peter away. Although Sam's intervention goes against Shatterstar's code of conduct, he realizes that they're losing the fight. Sam calls back Feral, who is getting bested by Rain at every step, and she doesn't argue with the decision. Next, Cannonball focuses on the skirmish between Boomer and Multiple Man. He flies away with Boomer, hitting Multiple Man in the process, causing him to produce more duplicates, but it doesn't matter. X-Force plans on retreating, and that too, quickly. He reaches the iPack with Shatterstar in his wake, who carries an unconscious Richter into their getaway vehicle. But Havoc has managed to gather his bearings, and Alex is seriously pissed off. He musters all his energy and hits the iPack with a plasma blast as it flies out of sight. As the other X-Factor members gather around him, Alex reveals that he's always intended to let the X-Force get away, and hitting the iPack with an underpowered plasma blast was a part of this plan. The Smoke and the X-Force members will lead the X-Factor to their base, where they can apprehend them all, and most of all, find their mentor, Cable. "Mind if we come along to back up your plan?" says a voice from behind them. Alex and the others turn around to find members of the X-Men's blue team: Wolverine, Psylocke, Gambit, Rogue, and Beast. They plan on pursuing the X-Force while the X-Factor decides to go back to the hospital and check on the Professor. Back at the hospital, things aren't looking good for Charles. The doctors operating on him stare at his wound in bewilderment, stunned as one of them finally manages to blurt out, "Dear God, what the blazes is that?" Similarly, on the other side of the country, Caliban and the rest of the Horsemen approach their leader, Apocalypse. They deliver Cyclops and Jean, their heads covered in mutant power-suppressing helmets and hands bound with high-density steel handcuffs. "Excellent, my horsemen. You have brought Cyclops and Jean Grey to me. You will be rewarded. Leave me now," says the Blue Warrior God, and his horsemen obediently leave his hideout. But as they walk away and Jean and Cyclops lie unconscious at his feet, Apocalypse's form begins to change. Turns out, this isn't Apocalypse at all. It's Mr. Sinister. X-Factor has reached back at the hospital and things have gone from bad to worse. Xavier has been put in the latest stasis equipment and has been stabilized for now. But jutting out of the wound in his chest is black organic material, alien to his body. Alex knows what it is. It's a technovirus, and it can't be stopped. It transforms living tissue into a mechanical organism. He tells the other X-Men. The rest of the X-Men decide to take the Professor back to the X-Mansion. If the virus can't be stopped, the least they can do is to make sure that the Professor spends the last of his days in his home. X-Men 14, Fingers on the Trigger. Charles has now been taken to the X-Mansion and is now on critical life support, his body in terminal stasis. Beast and Charles's longtime flame, Dr. Moira McTaggart, desperately try to understand and experiment on the technorganic virus in order to find a cure, but each attempt is futile. No matter what they try, the virus finds a way to reroute and replicate itself to overcome its obstacles. The virus is self-terminating and self-replicatory, and Beast and Moira are at a loss. The only thing for the X-Men to do is to find a cure before the virus takes over Charles's entire body. When Valerie Cooper, Aurora, and Alex realize this, there's not much these leaders can do but to share the truth with their fellow X-Men, and that they do. They tell everyone that if they don't find a cure within the next few days, then all will be lost, and their longtime mentor will be no more. And so the X-Men strategize and lay out a plan of attack. Beast will switch teams and join the Gold Team as he, Archangel, and Iceman have the most experience fighting Apocalypse. They also need to focus on finding their missing teammates, Jean Grey and Scott Summers. The X-Factor also lends their best to the Gold Team. Quicksilver, the rest of the X-Men and X-Factor will search for the X-Force and Cable, while Bishop stays behind in the mansion, hoping this time he won't fail to protect the Professor. And so everyone disperses, and Bishop guards the mansion with his life every second. We now move continents and arrive in Bocas del Toro, Panama. The air is humid and the summer heat simmers the ground as lush green plants enjoy their preferred climate. Near an abandoned building alongside the wreck of an aircraft, Reaper and Forearm, two mutants from the MLF, Mutant Liberation Front, wait for someone. Forearm is a mutant with, well, 4 arms and superhuman strength, stamina, and durability. Reaper, on the other hand, currently has the powers of chemical secretion and weapon mastery. His preferred choice of weapon is a large scythe, further leaning into his mutant name, Reaper. The two of them cook in Panama's intense summer heat as Reaper begins to sweat on forearm, who's awfully tense. Reaper, on the other hand, is more relaxed than ever. He hates this heat and wants to return to his MLF hideout as soon as possible. "Where the heck is this Phoebe?" says Reaper, when suddenly a hand appears from behind him, grabs him by the hand, and chucks him aside. It's Mr. Sinister, and he's the mutant they've been waiting for. Forearm and Reaper are here on behalf of the MLF to hand over a secure package to Mr. Sinister. And what do they get in return? Well, it's Jean Grey and Cyclops. Mr. Sinister hands over the bodies to them, Jean and Scott in deep slumber and in portable stasis containers. And when Mr. Sinister demands his secure package angrily, a loud hiss behind them takes them by surprise. Slowly, the thin air parts ways to give way to a yellow portal, and out of it steps Zero, second in command at the MLF. Zero is a synthesized mutant from the future and is mute. He's equipped with high-tech 39th century sensors to detect and dampen threats including weapons and mutant. He also has the power of teleportation, which extends to the ability of keeping portals open for a short period of time. Zero hands over the package to Mr. Sinister, and it contains something related to a species' genetic matrix. Mr. Sinister is more than happy to receive his package as Zero takes Forearm and Reaper back with him through the portal. And as they leave, Mr. Sinister smirks and says out loud, "Good riddance to you all, for I've received the better end of this bargain. I now have a piece of the future, and with it, I shall shake the ever-shifting foundations of mutant kind forevermore." In Texas tonight, we see the IPAC nosedive toward the ground. Sam's suspicions have come to fruition. The IPAC wasn't exactly the getaway vehicle the X-Force wanted. As the stolen shield carrier plummets toward the ground with increasing speed, Cannonball motions to Richter, who already knows what he's supposed to do. Richter opens a hatch and looks out of the carrier as fires begin to erupt in various parts of the carrier due to increasing speed and technical failures. He musters all his powers and uses kinetic vibrations to slow down the carrier's descent drastically. And although it's enough, they still have a bumpy crash landing in the forests of Texas. The carrier is toast. But the X-Force is in luck as Boomer informs Sam that the communications are still working. She calls in the rest of the X-Force, but how will they get here before the X-Men do? That's the real question. Across the continent, in Egypt, 25 miles northwest of Bani Manzar, something stirs inside an ancient pyramid. This place, which was once a site of worship and guidance for the ancient folks, is now the abode of Apocalypse's regenerative slumber. 9 mutants. The Dark Riders stand in anticipation as Apocalypse's coffin hisses in front of them. Dark Riders are mutants that vie for supremacy. They serve the most powerful mutant, and thus their leader in the modern day is Apocalypse. Apocalypse groans in pain as he's awoken from his slumber and says, "Why has Apocalypse been awakened in an unfinished state of organic coherence?" Turns out his regenerative sleep wasn't completed, and the Blue Warrior God is still in a weakened state. But waking him up was important for the Dark Riders. He grabs Foxbat by the throat, a mutant with the power of superhuman abilities and fangs and claws. But that's when Gauntlet steps in and informs his master that there are bigger things at play. Jean and Cyclops have been kidnapped, and the deed was carried out by his Horsemen in his name. Meanwhile, back in the US, Blackbird is zipping through the air, hastily making its way toward West Texas, the location of X-Force's IPAC crash. It carries X-Factor alongside the remaining X-Men. This team includes Havoc, Psylocke, Wolfsbane, Strong Guy, Polaris, Gambit, Rogue, Multiple Man, and Wolverine. Inside the Blackbird, tension hangs in the air as Havoc is conflicted about their current situation. They hadn't been able to track the X-Force using Cerebro for the past 8 months, but now, suddenly they can track half of the team that escaped New York. Moreover, something in his gut tells him that the young mutants have nothing to do with the assassination attempt on Xavier's life. The same is the state of Gambit, who contemplates X-Force's actions and defends them when the others blame them for the Professor's current state. Gambit can see the truth. Cable's actions don't count toward X-Force's intentions. He says, merely separating the soldiers from the generals. Saul and Polaris quips back at him, "I wonder how the soldiers could let the general turn them this cold, this hard." And this is when Wolverine chimes in as he lights a cigarette in the confines of the plane. "Well, maybe it ain't Cable that's turned him this way, darling. Maybe it's just the way of the world that did it. Maybe the dream is dead." All this conversation has been heavily weighing down on Alex, and as soon as they near the location, he eagerly cuts them all off, informing them that it's time for some action. They've reached the Texas-New Mexico border, and the X-Force are sitting ducks. It's time they settled up for what they're here to do, apprehend their former students. High above Earth's atmosphere, there's a space station in orbit called the Grey Malkin. It was put there by Cable, and in charge of it is Cable's celestial AI from the future, called the Professor. The Professor has been activated after a long time, and his first words are temporal displacement activated. Online. Temporal displacement processing. Welcome back to Grey Malkin, Nathan. And we see Cable pop out of thin air, exhausted, stumbling as though he's drunk. It'd be a fitting description. Temporal travel can cause hangovers of sorts, which is why he screams at the Professor to keep his voice down. But due to time dilation, Cable has spent 11 months in the future. He stumbles for a few more minutes and then straightens up and says, "Fill me in on what's happening." And the Professor has been all too eager to inform him about what's going on. Jean and Scott have been kidnapped, and the assassination attempt on Xavier has left him in a catatonic state. This never happened in the future, Professor. Who did this? Who shot Xavier? And Cable's eyes widen in horror as the AI plays the footage of the assassination, informing Cable that it was he who shot Xavier. Back at the mansion, Bishop has been on his toes ever since the X-Men and X-Factor left him in charge. The man hasn't slept or eaten in an attempt to remedy his failure to protect Xavier at the concert. Jubilee, despite her best efforts, has been worried about him. He's been up all night guarding the mansion, and she wants him to get some sleep so he doesn't exhaust himself. "Jubilation, I will not rest until I'm certain Xavier is safe." He, however, takes the coffee she brought him as Jubilee begins to leave, knowing too well that Bishop won't listen to her. But that's when all hell breaks loose. The security alarms ring out in a frenzy as Bishop rushes inside the mansion with Jubilee in his wake. The perimeter has been breached. Back in West Texas, the Blackbird lands near the IPAC crash site, and every X-Men and member of the X-Factor steps out with intent. Alex splits them into two groups. One will follow Rogue, and the other will follow Alex. They both have cerebro scanners which they'll use to pin down X-Force. Each group will make their way around the IPAC crash site from either side, but something's not right. Cerebro's going haywire, and so are Wolverine's senses. Although we can pick up their scent seem to be muted, as though they're waiting, ready to pounce on them as soon as they get the chance. Wolverine sticks close to the IPAC, waiting in anticipation as the other X-Men follow his lead. Alex's group on the other side of the IPAC finds nothing, and this puts them on the edge as he charges up his powers expecting an ambush. Cerebro scanners aren't any help either. They can pick up movement all around them, but the signal is garbled, and so are Wolverine and Reign's senses. They can pinpoint X-Force's location, and that's when disaster strikes. Psylocke is hit by Sunspot's solar blast, which stuns her instantly. The group isn't facing the students anymore. They're facing trained soldiers. Gambit helps Psylocke get back up on her feet, and that's when Sam appears with his entire X-Force team. "We don't want to fight, folks, but as you can see, if that's the choice you want to make, well, X-Force is more than ready to give you one." Back at the X-Mansion, things further come crashing down as Bishop barges in through the front door and is greeted by Mr. Sinister, who holds Valerie Cooper and Stephanie Hunter by the throat. Bishop stands stunned as Mr. Sinister laughs and says, "I have not come to praise Charles Xavier, but to bury him for the sins of his failures. Would you care to be among those sins, Mr. Bishop? Would you care to die for them?" X-Force 16, Jack Lighting. X-Force faces the X-Men and X-Factor in West Texas. The tension between them can be cut with a knife, but none of them wants to fight the other. Sunspot, Richter, Feral, Warpath, Siren, and Boomer stand behind Sam with their fists raised, ready to fight the X-Men, while Alex asks them to surrender themselves as he says, "Tell us what Cable is up to." But the X-Force is as clueless as them. Cable has been gone for almost a month, and they have no clue of his whereabouts. But as Sam says this, Feral's aggressive instincts take control. Every part of her body screams that the X-Men are going to attack, and so she does the unthinkable and attacks them first. This sets everything in motion as each domino falls to create the unfolding chaos. Feral swipes her claws at Gambit while Cannonball and Rogue take to the air. Warpath heads for Strong Guy while Shatterstar, the Master Swordsmith, faces off against his mentor, Wolverine. Cannonball comes crashing down and hits Alex with a huge uppercut as he reiterates their intentions. They're no longer the X-Men's new mutants. They are X-Force, and he plans to show them what they're capable of. "Lord Wolverine, forgive my trespass, but a cadre warrior prefers death to capture," apologizes Shatterstar to Wolverine as he gets his sword swiped away by his claws. Wolverine doesn't mind and lets Shatterstar know that this time the claws will be used for real. Siren screams at Jamie, who splits into more and more dupes as she gets angrier by the second because he remembers nothing what's happened between them. Richter, on the other hand, faces a moral dilemma as he now has to fight Reign. He doesn't want to, but Reign is a woman of honor, and she'll do what is needed at any cost. This battle, filled with emotional and physical turmoil, rages on as Rogue heads for Boomer and punches her in the face. Rogue's powers make her immune to Boomer's blasts. The same happens with Warpath, who fails to realize that Strong Guy had been absorbing the kinetic power of each blow he threw at him, and now Strong Guy was ready to return their favor. All he has to do is swipe at Warpath and the stored kinetic energy sends Warpath flying across the field. Polaris faces off against Sunspot while in the background Wolverine is giving into his rage. And this only worsens the odds for Shatterstar as he gets punched in the gut by Logan and picked off his feet as Wolverine rages on. Seeing Shatterstar fail is what does it for Richter, who now uses his seismic powers to send Rain hurtling towards the crashed iPack in an instant. Alex never wanted to fight Sam, which is why maybe he couldn't attack him and has been bested by Cannonball. Havoc lies defeated on the ground as Sam shouts to his friends, "We're out of here! X-Force! Regroup!" And the entire X-Force starts for a quick escape. Alex, who's on the ground, hears this and stirs to life. Despite his current state, Havoc cannot fail this mission. He raises his arm and sends out a huge plasma blast which catches Richter point blank, sending him flying backwards. This, however, doesn't stop the X-Force as they jump down into the valley with a stream below and make their escape. The X-Men and X-Factor regroup and tend to the injured. Gambit and Rogue take care of Psylocke, who's in rough shape, while Strong Guy holds an unconscious Rain in his arms. But Wolverine isn't done yet. He's a hunter, and tracking is what he does best. He takes off into the night alone, stalking the X-Force just like the apex predator that he is. We catch up with the X-Men's Gold Team and their new additions on the East Coast in Chesapeake Bay. Blackbird silently touches ground as out walk the X-Men. Storm, Archangel, Quicksilver, Iceman, Colossus, and Beast. They're ready for a fight. A fight to the death if that's what it takes to rescue Jean and Scott from Apocalypse. They stare at a warehouse in the distance as Storm uses the Cerebro scanner to look for clues. Bingo! She finds Caliban's mutagenic signature coming from the warehouse and asks Quicksilver and Archangel to perform aerial and ground reconnaissance. Quicksilver has already zipped off as Archangel takes to the air. By the time the team reaches the outside of the warehouse, merely a few feet away, Quicksilver has checked everything back and returned to them. "Boys moi! Quicksilver! I never dreamt you were this fast," says the Russian mutant as Peter informs them everything is clear on the outside. If Caliban and the Horsemen are here, they're likely waiting for them on the inside. And that's all Beast and Colossus need to hear as they tear through the shutters and barge into the warehouse. The others walk in behind them, but it's pitch black, and making anything out in the dark of the night is next to impossible. Aurora walks ahead scanning the warehouse. She detects movement, but in reality there's nothing in front of her. Storm turns around and realizes her mistake and screams, "Goodness, Hank! Above you!" But it's too late. Famine has already pounced on Beast, infecting him with her blight, and his body is reduced to bones even before they touch the ground. Colossus tries to intervene, but is soon met by Caliban's fist, which sends him flying. This is the last straw for Aurora, as she teams up with Iceman to subdue the Horsemen. She produces a blanket of moisture, as Iceman begins trapping each of their foes in ice. By this time, Archangel has returned from the air, as he informs Aurora that there's nobody in the warehouse except Caliban and Famine. Caliban is buried under tons of ice by now, while Quicksilver darts in and clotheslines Famine, hitting her straight in the neck. The fastest man on Earth has the fastest metabolism, which means he's barely affected by Famine's touch, although it leaves him out of breath when he comes to a stop near his friends. Hank, too, seems to be okay and alive, although you can't blame him when he says hungry, considering the pile of bones he's now become. Archangel turns toward the ice and spots a strange pink-colored sphere, and as he approaches the object, it suddenly sparks to life and projects a hologram in the room. It's Mr. Sinister. Everybody's stunned as the projection speaks to everyone. "If this is being seen, then I assume the Horsemen have been defeated, and the X-Men have advanced to the next level of the game. It was I who abducted your friends, and now my part in this game concludes. But do not be deterred, for Apocalypse, unbeknownst even to him, is still the cause of this madness." Mr. Sinister smiles, evil dripping from his eyes as a raging Archangel smashes the projector angrily. They've all been played. Back at the mansion, things are only worse. Mr. Sinister now holds Valerie and Stephanie in the air by their necks as he faces off against Bishop, who has both of his guns drawn and pointed at him. Bishop isn't pleased one bit by Mr. Sinister's games and tells him that he's ready to die for Xavier. Mr. Sinister doesn't believe his words, so Bishop pulls the trigger the very next second and shoots Sinister twice directly in the face. "Double tap," says the man from the future as he walks forward and bends down. Sadly, he isn't familiar with Mr. Sinister, who has a regenerative healing factor even better than Wolverine. So, as Bishop bends down to confirm his kill, Sinister grabs him by the throat and flips him away. Mr. Sinister gets up with a gaping hole through the entire right side of his face. He's pleased with Bishop as he stands there and continues to tell him that he isn't here to kill Xavier. Instead, Mr. Sinister is here at the X-Mansion to point them in the right direction. It's the next step in his twisted game of fate. He holds up an unconscious Bishop by the hair and says, "My first priority is to my mission. One which will only be enhanced if you stop the perpetrator of this nefarious scheme." And that's when Valerie, who's been on the floor, asks Mr. Sinister to tell them the name of the person who started this all. Another evil smile spreads across Sinister's face as he drops Bishop to the floor and leaves as he steps over Valerie. In his wake, he drops a paper with a name on it. Valerie's eyes widen with terror as she reads it. We now move to a quaint little chalet in Davos Dorf, Switzerland. It's Cable's safe house and he's preparing inside. The walls are lined from end to end with various weapons from the future as Cable checks and cleans each and every one by hand. He asks his AI for a status report and the professor's voice echoes in the safe house. There has been an escalation in maneuvers, Nathan. Mr. Sinister visited the X-Mansion. X-Force is engaged in West Texas. Caliban and Famine have been defeated in Virginia. Cable straps weapons on his body and armor one by one until he's covered in them head to toe. Everything's happening quickly, too quickly. And Cable knows he needs to put an end to this as he leaves the hideout. It's time to take him down, Professor. Once and for all, man to man. And quite literally, face to face. Somewhere unknown, in a brightly lit tunnel, Forearm drags unconscious Jean and Scott by the hair as Zero approaches him. Their boss wanted to see Jean and Scott, but Forearm hastily leaves before the big man can show up. Something about the big man scares him, and he doesn't wish to ever be face to face with him. A deep voice behind Zero orders the mutant to awaken Jean and Scott. Zero bends down and touches their foreheads, waking up the two X-Men instantly. Scott and Jean slowly come to their senses when they realize they don't know where they are, and they've been put into their uniforms. "Please calm yourselves," says Zero's boss from behind them, and Jean and Scott turn around. They don't know who it is, so the man goes on to introduce himself. "I am Strife, the crown prince of mutant kind, and you, the king and queen of what is to come. Father, mother, welcome to the end of tomorrow." Back in Texas, the X-Force is leaping and bounding the way through the jungle hastily. Sam knows they need to put as much distance as they can between them and the X-Men. Feral can't smell anyone behind them, but Sunspot knows better. He knows at least one man from the X-Men is bound to be following them. And he's right. The very next moment, Sam is ambushed by a leaping Wolverine as he takes down Cannonball with a single move. Feral furiously swipes at Wolverine, but is already leapt away, and all she catches with her claws is thin air. Sam struggles to breathe in the water below. Wolverine is hiding up in the trees, but none of them seem to be able to find him. The X-Force members look around frantically as Sam commands them to regroup and call out the perimeter watch. 3 o'clock to 6, Sammy. "Nothing here," calls out Siren. But as soon as she does, her face recoils in horror as a psychic knife sticks out of her forehead. She lets out a small cry and slumps into Psylocke's arms. "The rest are yours, Logan," she says as Feral grows with rage, but is soon ambushed by Wolverine, who has her by the throat. His middle claw unsheathed, with the other two sticking out on either side of her throat. "Your move, Samuel," he says, and Sam's eyes widen with horror as he turns around. Gambit, Rogue, Multiple Man, and tons of his duplicates surround the X-Force. Their escape seems out of the question. Sam sighs and raises his hands, as do the other X-Force members. The chase is over. Alex approaches Sam as he regrets doing what he's about to do, but Sam knows it's a little too late for regrets. In the background, Sam's teammates are handcuffed using power-suppressing cuffs, and it's Sam's turn next. With a loud ka-chink, the cuffs wrap around his arms and he's escorted into the plane. Multiple Man carries Siren inside, the look of dread plastered all over his face. The mood inside the Blackbird is full of regrets and shame as Richter longingly looks at Rain, who can't meet his eyes. Wolverine lights up another cigarette as Alex looks at him dejected with the latest mission. Uncanny X-Men 295. Familiar refrain. The issue opens on Apocalypse as he cries out in pain. He's still weak due to being woken up early from his healing slumber, and the downpour of rain only impedes his movement with each step he takes. Pain courses through every part of his body, but this only makes the psychopathic Blue Warrior God happier with each passing second as he inches through a river and then climbs a hill to reach his last safe house. He expects his Horsemen to be there, and Apocalypse plans on thoroughly interrogating them for their latest actions, kidnapping Scott and Jean. He finally reaches the top and breaks a window to the safe house to get inside. But today isn't Apocalypse's day, as instead of his Horsemen, he's greeted by the Gold Team. Storm, Quicksilver, Colossus, Archangel, Beast and Iceman all stand there with the incapacitated Horsemen at their feet. "We are here in search of our comrades. We have reason to believe you know where they are," says Colossus. Iceman isn't having any of it as he screams at Apocalypse, "And don't think that sickly complexion of yours means we're gonna take it easy on you." Apocalypse smiles. After all, the ancient mutant wouldn't dare not expect anything less from his foes. Back at the mansion, the outdoors are covered in the serene autumn breeze. However, inside, the atmosphere is quite different, especially now that Jubilee can let loose on the X-Force who are confined to the danger room. "I'll say it again, loser. You're nothing but a bunch of head-padded, hyperthyroided, pig-headed, spoiled brat. Poorly dressed, overly accessorized, delusionally disadvantaged X-Men wannabes in a major need of total toot adjustment." Strong Guy appears behind her before Jubilee can continue the relentless assault of words. He grabs her by her coat, picks her up in the air, and carries her out. Ferrell's been growling all this while, but Sam's doing his best to keep her calm. Jubilee's harsh words didn't really help uplift the already defeated morale of the X-Force. Strong Guy throws Jubilee out of the danger room and locks the doors to it. She sits there, in the dark, clearly upset at the wrong people, but for the right reasons. In the control room, Lorna Dane, aka Polaris 2, is having a hard time coping with the current situation as tears stream down her face. These are just kids, the former New Mutants. Kids she loves, and now they're imprisoned in the danger room, with no amenities, no programs, no social programs. Nothing to remotely suggest that this isn't a holding cell, and that they aren't prisoners. Alex, however, feels differently. Until the X-Force can prove they've cut all ties with Cable, they need to be detained. Detain Alex? Accomplices? They're just kids, no older than we were when we started out. What happened? Even though she expects Alex to soften up, Charles's impending death weighs heavily on him, as all he says to her is, "Life. Life happened." He wipes the tears and takes her to the briefing room. Val has invited everyone there in light of Mr. Sinister's recent visit. Meanwhile, one floor above, Psylocke stands watch over the professor as the technorganic virus continues to slowly take over. Even his face is now beginning to change as the virus spreads throughout his body. And although she stands as still as a rock, Psylocke is going through her own turmoil inside her mind. She, better than anyone else, understands what Xavier is going through. After all, she had her heart and soul sculpted into an entirely new form. Her thoughts are, however, soon interrupted when she's called to the debriefing by Valerie over the network. Back with the Gold Team. Iceman has managed to restrain Apocalypse, who's in disbelief that the X-Men can be so naive as to trust the words of a mutant like Mr. Sinister. The Gold Team is still unaware of Mr. Sinister's recent visit to the X-Mansion, nor do they know the real identity of the perpetrator behind this plot. Apocalypse rages at the sight of the Gold Team being manipulated, and him being used as a pawn in the game. He manages to break free of Bobby's ice grip, but before he can attack them, Beast lunges at him. Beast can see that although Apocalypse's mind is sound, his body is too weak. But this time, Henry's wrong. Apocalypse sends him flying across the room with a quick punch as Storm tries to grab him mid-air to reduce the impact. Sadly, this sends both of them right out of the window. This enrages the other X-Men, who begin attacking Apocalypse furiously. And although Apocalypse manages to subdue Peter thanks to his molecular control over his body, he's soon bested by Archangel and Colossus. Colossus has him pinned to the ground as Archangel uses his razor-sharp wings to hold him by the throat. Unbeknownst to the X-Men, Apocalypse has integrated each of his safe houses with alien technology he procured during the Age of Apocalypse. And although the Blue Warrior God doesn't understand it much, it's more than enough to aid him when he's cornered like this. Apocalypse triggers an explosion which sends everyone flying in different directions. Apocalypse can control each molecule of his body, extending and contracting it as he pleases, which is why absorbing the explosion is no big deal for him. However, he knows he doesn't have much time. Storm and Beast are on their way, and it won't be long before Bobby, Warren, and Colossus come to their senses. He needs to get to the bottom of this conspiracy and conserve his energy for the final battle that is imminent. And so, Apocalypse teleports out of his safe house using the alien technology imbibed in it before either of the X-Men can wake up. Meanwhile, somewhere in the world, Strife is busy playing with his twisted games with Jean and Scott. The two have been separated, and for the past few hours, Jean has been living one of her worst nightmares. She's held in the air by 100,000 mechanical servo arms that poke and prod at her body, grabbing and toying with her as though she's an object. And although her powers haven't been dampened, telekinesis and telepathy are unable to help her out of this inhumane prison. But Jean doesn't make a sound despite her hideous turmoil. Now, this is what Strife wants: to hear her cry out in pain, beg for his mercy, so she won't. Finally, the nightmare comes to an end as Strife walks in the room and holds her up by the throat and says, "To be clutched and clawed by strange, unfeeling, uncaring alien hands. Not at all unlike, I must assume, what an innocent babe feels when bereft of the love and warmth that is its birthright. A horrifying feeling, no? Wouldn't you agree? What kind of twisted game is this? What kind of revenge is this? And if this is revenge, then what is it for?" As Jean wonders all of this, she passes out, and Strife carries her limp body away to the next twisted nightmare he has planned for her. Things at the X-Mansion are as grim and gloomy as ever. The X-Men, X-Factor, and all the duplicates of Multiple Man are gathered in the room as Valerie pulls up an image of Strife on the big screen and informs them of their latest find: their only lead, Strife. And even though Mr. Sinister gave them a name, that's all they have, just a name. Valerie debriefs them all on Mr. Sinister's visit and how the mutant was kind enough to give them Strife's name, and despite searching every database at their disposal, including X-Factor's governmental database, they know very little about him. They don't know his powers, but they do know that Strife leads the Mutant Liberation Front, or the MLF. Previously, the MLF would perform hit-and-run operations, like the recent attack on France's genetic imaging plant, but it seems Strife is now growing bolder. Most of the X-Men aren't happy with the information at their disposal. Some speculate that it could simply be Cable wearing an elaborate costume. But before Valerie can proceed further with the meeting, she notices that Wolverine and Bishop are missing from the debriefing. And when she asks Rogue and Gambit about their whereabouts, the two sheepishly make excuses, saying that the two should be here any minute. However, in reality, Rogue and Gambit know Bishop and Logan too well. These are men of action and not words, which is why they couldn't do much when they set out on their own investigation. And Logan and Bishop have reached Canada as they investigate. The two of them are at Department K, specifically, a covert branch of the Canadian Security Agency. Although the two of them had planned to keep a low profile, a 6.5-foot burly guy with futuristic guns and a short, stocky man with retractable claws and a bright yellow costume isn't exactly as covert as they thought. The two of them leap at the Canadian security forces as soon as they're discovered. Their reason for being here, you ask? Well, they need Department K's resources to track down Cable, but sadly, Department K is old school. Every information they store is on papers and not digitized. So the two of them couldn't hack and get it remotely. This needs to be done the old school way, manually. Bishop and Wolverine have no trouble taking care of all the security guards as they make their way to the records room. Back at the X-Mansion, Sam, aka Cannonball from the X-Force, is summoned by Gambit and Havoc out of the danger room where all the X-Force is being held. "Come in, make yourself..." But before Alex can finish his words, Sam does it for him and says, "Comfortable? Huh, not likely, Alex. Not with the rest of my team locked up like a bunch of criminals." Sam believes that Gambit and Alex plan on using the old tactic of divide and conquer on the X-Force by isolating Sam from his team. Gambit, on the other hand, has been on the edge for days and is in no mood for mind games. He believes Sam is holding more information in his head than he has disclosed to the X-Men, and he plans to pry it out of him one way or the other. "Very subtle, Gambit. Maybe next time you could hit him over the head with a brick," says Alex, clearly not pleased by his approach. Alex wants to know what Sam knows about the MLF. Sam doesn't know much except that the Liberation Front is led by Strife. X-Force has been looking to eradicate them for months. However, with their limited resources, they haven't been able to narrow down their location. This, however, could change if Sam had access to X-Men's resources and databases. However, this help will come at a price. A hefty price. Sam wants a full presidential pardon for each member of the X-Force, but his proposition is quickly shot down. Alex can't allow this. However, Gambit has other plans. He offers Sam the chance to find and take down the MLF, which might get the X-Force in the good graces of the president. Gambit hands Sam his uniform, and the young mutant quickly gets to work and says, "You'll realize I'm only offering my best guess, right?" And Alex turns toward the window and replies, "Sam, offering your best guess is all the professor ever asked from any of us." X-Factor 85. Snicks and Bones. On the other side of the continent, at Department K's headquarters in Canada, things are looking up for Wolverine and Bishop when the wall to the records room beside them is suddenly blown away. When the two of them turn around, they can't believe their luck. It's Cable who has his face wide open in anger. While this is certainly what the pair wants, this is Cable's nightmare. His first attempt to get involved after being away for 26 days, and he looks into Wolverine and Bishop. "Murderer!" screams Bishop at Cable, and opens fire as Wolverine unsheathes his claws. Cable ducks, kicks a file cabinet at Bishop, which knocks him down and runs toward the record room as he's pursued by Wolverine. "You ain't gonna take me down by tossing a file cabinet, Cable," says Wolverine as he slashes at Cable. "No more messing around. I want answers." Cable knows he doesn't stand a chance against Wolverine as he's pinned down by him. Wolverine raises his claws and says that he'll chop Cable up limb by limb if he doesn't start speaking. But Cable manages to find his footing and instantly shoots at Logan. Logan dodges easily and slices his gun, which only angers Cable further as he punches Wolverine across the face. He smashes Wolverine into a wall and runs toward the armory. By now, Bishop has managed to find them as he chases after Cable, leaving Wolverine on the floor as he recovers. Cable punches through the armory's wall using his metal arm and arms himself with every weapon he can find and takes cover. As Bishop approaches the hole in the wall, Cable shoots him in the chest. Sadly, what he used was an energy weapon, and Bishop can absorb and redirect energy. It's his mutant power. Bishop redirects the energy to his fist as he screams in anger, "I am not a kid, Cable, and this is the last thing you would want to do." Bishop shoots the energy back at Cable from his fist, and it hits him in the chest in point-blank range, sending Cable hurtling back into the armory as he crashes against the wall. "Point taken," he says as he lies there, seemingly having accepted his defeat. Thanks to Sam's efforts, the X-Men have narrowed down the MLF's location to Dusty Bowl, Arkansas, where they currently are. It's an old abandoned town, or at least it was supposed to be, but there are tons of armed men roaming around. For now, there's only Storm, Havoc, and Cannonball on the ground, and Sam seems to be trying a new approach. He's trying to avert expectations by being overt instead of covert.
Excuse me, my name's Cannonball, and me and my associates have reason to believe that this is the Mutant Liberation Front's hideout.
But before he can say any more, the armed men surround and approach them with their guns drawn. Aurora is a bit shaken up as she hides behind Alex, who says,
"Well, how about that?
After 9 possible towns, we've finally struck gold." He turns around to the approaching men and screams,
"All right, you're all under arrest."
The goons, however, aren't impressed as there are only 3 of them, but that's when they're proven wrong. Suddenly, every goon surrounding Alex, Sam and Aurora has their guns pulled out of their hands thanks to Polaris, who uses her magnetic powers to yank every weapon away. She joins the fight with Archangel and Iceman accompanying her from the air. Archangel begins cutting down guns using his metal wings, while Iceman starts freezing goons. From the east, Rogue, Gambit and Psylocke join the fight and make easy work of the goons that make the mistake of approaching them. Soon, Quicksilver and Boom Boom start cutting down the herd of men as they approach from the north. The whole town has been surrounded by the X-Men, but these are just grunts, low-life henchmen for hire. The X-Men need to find the big guns, and so, without a second thought, Havoc blasts a hole in the ground. Bingo! He hits metal, and the whole town seems to be a ruse to hide the real base of operations underground. Back in Davosdorf, Switzerland, Apocalypse has found Cable's safe house. It's laden with Apocalypse's technology. Every inch of the safe house is covered in tech which is either straight from Apocalypse or some derivation of his technology. This puzzles the Blue Warrior God because only people that are familiar enough with the workings of his former ship are the X-Men. As he thinks and thinks, he seems to have arrived at a conclusion as his face recoils in anger. It's time Apocalypse took this fight to the next level. Back in Arkansas, the X-Men have infiltrated the underground base, and leading the charge is Sam, followed by Bobby, as they face Dragoness and her squadron of elite goons. She's a mutant with scales on her body, artificial wings and the power to generate bioelectricity. "Could you leave the Dragon Lady to me, Assman?
We got us an old score to settle,"
says Cannonball as he charges up and flies toward Dragoness. Iceman continues to fight the other as he watches Dragoness take to the air and fly in fear from Cannonball. Sam makes quick work of her squadron and continues chasing after Dragoness, who's desperately trying to please him. She says she likes him and finds Cannonball very attractive. She can be quite useful to him. But Sam is having none of it as he punches into her, hurtling both of them toward the ground. But this was the wrong move. He's now close to her. Not only can she use her stingers, but also her bioelectricity. She blasts Cannonball directly in the chest, knocking him out momentarily, enough that Sam crashes into the ground with a large explosion. But she's soon surrounded by Storm, Rogue and Polaris. Sam has always been hesitant when fighting women, and Rogue knows that. However, the same doesn't apply to the 3 of them. Sam slowly comes to his senses and leans against a wall, catching his breath when he's suddenly scared to death as Dragoness is smacked against the very same wall by Rogue the next second. In another part of the underground base, things aren't looking good for Quicksilver as he's slowed to only 10 miles per hour by Tempo, a mutant that can slow down and speed up time. She orders her men to shoot Quicksilver quickly before she loses grip on him again, as sweat and tears stream down the strained face of Pisa. But before her henchmen can act on her orders, they're hit in the head by Gambit's molecularly accelerated playing cards, while Tempo is stabbed in the head with a psi knife by Psylocke. Peter looks at them in silence as the 2 stare back at him. Although his ego is bruised, Gambit and Psylocke are glad they could save his life, and so is Quicksilver. Let's check in with Cyclops, who's surrounded by pitch-black darkness. And although Scott can't see anything or anyone, he can hear movement all around him. Scott's been tormented for days, for weeks now, and he's had enough. He lets out optic blasts in each and every direction he seems to hear movement. Suddenly, he manages to hit something, and this when the lights are turned on in the room. Scott surrounded by innocent children, all of them sticking flat to the ground in fear of his optic blasts. And at his feet is an injured Jean, holding children close to herself, protecting them. Scott cries out in horror as he realizes what he's done. He may have killed Jean, the love of his life. This is when Strife approaches from behind and puts him in a contraption for his head that'll not only suppress Scott's powers, but also knock him unconscious. Strife towers over Scott as he lies unconscious on the ground, and Jean is passed out due to her injuries as he says,
"You're a born leader, Cyclops, but sometimes you're operating in complete dark, and when you do these things, you end up injuring the ones you love. Does that matter to you at all? No? Somehow I doubt that it does." Back at the underground base in Arkansas, the battle rages on, and we catch up with Archangel, who's being manhandled by Forearm. Forearm's too strong for Warren, and his forearms make it easier for him to incapacitate and hold Archangel in place. Archangel has no choice but to bite down on one of his arms, forcing him to throw Warren away. Warren now has his back turned toward the corridor and fails to notice an incoming sneak attack from Kamakazi. Kamakazi is a mutant with the power to accelerate atoms and generate explosions at will. And as he flies toward Warren from behind, Archangel suspects nothing.
Warren gets ready to face off against Forearm once again and flexes his steel wings. Wrong move, because Kamakazi was about to pounce on him, but the flexing metal wings decapitate the flying mutant instantly. His head is sliced clean off his body, which bounces on the floor and rolls towards Boomer, who's busy fighting and having a good time. That's until she looks down at her feet and catches the decapitated head of Kamakazi staring back up at her. Ah! Boomer's sudden gagging garners Archangel and Forearm's attention.
It touched me! Ugh!
Warren flies over to her, and as he lands, he spots the blood on his wings and realizes what might have happened. Although his face doesn't show it, there's enough death already on Warren's hands, and this unintended one only makes things worse.
Well, I guess with a name like Kamakazi, you just know he's gonna buy it,
says Boomer, trying to make Warren feel better, but it's too soon. Too soon to make jokes about someone's death. Archangel turns around and flies away in disappointment. Back at Department K, the fight between Cable, Wolverine, and Bishop is raging on. Everything seems to be at a standstill as neither Cable nor the two X-Men members plan on giving up. This is when Cable's AI, the Professor, chimes in, asking Cable to make the only logical choice that can put an end to this controlled mayhem. Cable holds Wolverine's arm. His claws inches away from his eyes and says, "Wolverine, listen, I didn't do it. I did not, repeat, not shoot Xavier." And although Wolverine pauses, Bishop puts Cable in a headlock, still not convinced. After all, he was there in Central Park. He saw Cable shoot the Professor. Cable, however, isn't having any of it, as he raises his arms up and flips Bishop over his shoulders, smacking him into the wall in front of him. Wolverine is angry, not because Bishop was hurt, but because he can't believe Cable's words. How can this be a frame-up? Cable, however, has always been a big proponent of truth, and Wolverine knows that. Cable stands there in front of him with his guard down, and asks Wolverine to strike him if he doesn't believe Cable. Wolverine can't decide, and for a moment it seems that he might thrust his claws into Cable's torso, but the next moment Logan sheathes his claws. Cable falls to the floor, finally enjoying the momentary relief, but Bishop is baffled that Wolverine isn't going to kill Cable, and Logan tells him that he needs to be 100% sure that Cable did it. Back at the hospital, where expatriates and a duplicate of Multiple Man are keeping watch of the injured Taylor, something sinister seems to be brewing. Prodigal walks up to Multiple Man as he suspects his presence at the hospital isn't to ensure Taylor's safety, but to make sure none of the expatriates escape. But before Jamie's duplicate can come clean, Lucas walks in from behind and puts Multiple Man to sleep using chloroform. The expatriates are planning to escape. X-Men 15, The Camel's Back. Back in the underground bunker in Arkansas, we encounter one of the most 90s things that happened in almost every comic. And this time it seems that the writers are having a bit of fun with this moment. Gambit faces off against MLF member Wildside, who manages to knock out Gambit. He plans to disembowel Gambit and practically gloats for too long, which allows Quicksilver to sneak up from behind and knock Wildside out instead. But as Peter tells Wildside he gloats too much, he doesn't realize that he himself is gloating too much, which gives Reaper the chance to sneak in from behind and slash at Quicksilver's ankles, rendering him unable to speed away. As you might have guessed by now, Reaper 2 stands over Peter and Gambit and monologues how he's gonna slice both their throats in one go. This is when he smells plasma and turns around to see Havoc charging behind him, ready to blast him away. This is when Psylocke steps in and stabs Reaper in the head with Psy-Knife, saving Alex the trouble of charging up. And wouldn't you know it, she poses and monologues over an incapacitated Reaper too long, but thankfully this time, before she gets ambushed by Forearm from behind, Boomer forces her to duck and shoots the plasma bombs at him. She stuns Forearm, who's then promptly kicked in the face by Psylocke, knocking him out. You can see how the writers were poking fun at the trope of someone monologuing for too long, which causes them to get ambushed. In the air, meanwhile, Dragoness has managed to grab her bearings but is still being chased by Storm, Rogue, and Polaris. Turns out, Dragoness's wings are mechanical, which allows Polaris to hold her magnetically in place while she's zapped by Storm, stripped of her wings and thrown toward the ground by Rogue. She falls near Thumbelina and Slab, mutant brother and sister who are too young and untrained to fight the X-Men. They make their escape but are soon frozen in place by Iceman as he continues incapacitating henchman after henchman with ease. Without Zero or Strife to coordinate the forces, the MLF are easy pickings for Bobby. Back on the ground, Boomer and Sam chase after their Skids and Rusty, former members of New Mutants. They're old friends. The two want to help them, but Rusty and Skids aren't having any of it. They've been brainwashed, and as Boomer approaches Skids, she kicks her right across the face, breaking Boomer's jaw. This momentarily pauses the action, but Rusty and Skids have no intention of giving in. Boomer and Cannonball realize that their old friends have been brainwashed by Strife, so the only option they have is to knock them out. Sam punches Rusty across the face with a loud smack, and Boomer takes care of Skids. Rogue, meanwhile, is flying around, taking the MLF forces out like fodder when she's suddenly ambushed by Strobe, who hits her with a concentrated light blast. This catches Rogue off guard, and she crashes against the wall with a loud thump. Strobe's victory, however, is short-lived as Polaris returns the favor by ambushing Strobe, who's wearing a metallic costume. The worst choice possible, as she realizes she can't move her body as Polaris uses her magnetic powers to hold her in place. The battles come to an end with Warren and Iceman taking care of any leftover henchmen. Bobby's worried about Warren considering the recent accidental death of Kamakazi at his hands. Warren doesn't want to talk about it, and Bobby lets it go for now, only because they're in the middle of a battle. But he plans to bring up the subject again when they're back at the mansion. Alex regroups with Sam and Aurora and says, "What now, Aurora?" And Storm replies, "Now we'll talk to these terrorists, and for their sakes, as well as ours, what they have to say had best help us find their leader, Strife." Back in Newfoundland, Canada, 5 miles north of St. John's, the coastline is rugged and unforgiving, mimicking the current predicament of Cable, Wolverine, and Bishop as the trio is being chased and shot at by advanced aerial vehicles developed by Department K. It seems the department has significantly increased their security budget, contrary to Wolverine's initial assumption before this mission. And why wouldn't they? After all, they've been chasing Cable all this while. Bishop wants to take all the carriers out, but Wolverine shoots down that idea. They're soldiers, and they're only doing their job. With no choice left, Cable orders a body slide teleport for all 3 of them to Grey Malkin, and as the trio gets surrounded by pink energy, Wolverine says, "Cable, son of a, what are you?" But Logan is unable to finish his words, and they're teleported out of there the very next moment. Back at the X-Mansion, Colossus is struggling to come to terms with his brother's recent suicide, and as a coping mechanism, he's working hard, too hard, to clear the mansion of unwanted rubble. It's then that he's approached by Strong Guy, who offers him coffee. "Hawaiian hazelnut mocha creme Jack Daniels." Ignoring the comment, Peter asks, "Do you have good news to tell me?" And Guido sips on his cup and says, "Yep, I put too much JD in here." Things aren't looking good for Charles. Despite Moira and Henry's best efforts, his condition has only gotten worse with time, and even more of his body has now been converted by the technorganic virus. Beast blames himself as Moira tries to calm him down, but he fears they'd lost the battle as soon as Charles was shot. All these events are part of Strife's twisted game, and he's been watching all this unfold from his headquarters. Zero stands guard behind Strife as we see the visuals on each monitor. Strife sees Wolverine, Bishop, and Cable escaping from Department K. He watches Forearm and other MLF mutants being captured. He has an eye on Apocalypse's pyramid, as well as an eye on Jean and Scott, who sit huddled against each other in horror. He asks Zero to maintain a close eye on each monitor as he gets up and walks towards Jean and Scott's prison. "Synth, prep warm milk substantive infant supplement by 2. He orders his AI, and then, holding the tray of supplement in hand, he walks into Jean and Scott's chamber where they're being held captive. The 2 of them instantly leap at the seemingly vulnerable Strife, his powers still unknown to them. This is when they get a glimpse into his arsenal as he blasts them away simply using his telekinetic powers. He's strong enough to not only hold Jean at bay, but also enough to immobilize Scott and his optic blast. Strife's twisted revenge only intensifies as the psychopathic villain force-feeds the supplement to Scott using his fingers as he says, "There's a good boy." He then throws away the plate, asking Scott if he enjoyed his dinner, if Strife fed him correctly like a father. "Is that how it's done? Is that how you nurse a child? Is it?" he screams as he propels Scott away from using his powers. Jean and Scott suspect the powers are being dampened by the room somehow as Strife begins to leave and says, "If I can easily understand what it requires to wean a child, so should you. Until next time." Strife goes back to his headquarters and commands Zero to open a portal to Apocalypse's pyramid. It's time he confronts the Blue Warrior God before he fully heals and comes for Strife. He reaches Bani Manzar in Egypt and enters Apocalypse's pyramid by exploding one of its walls. It's then that Strife is confronted by the Dark Riders. The explosion's falling rubble incapacitates Foxbat instantly, and Synapse and Tusk are no match for Strife as he takes care of them with a single swipe of his arm. It's Gauntlet's turn next, and he gets hurled through the air and into the wall. "All of you! Useless! Unfit!" screams Strife as he approaches the last Dark Rider, Hard Drive, a mutant with the ability to merge with technology. He's responsible for controlling and guarding Apocalypse's equipment, and although capable, he's still no match for Strife and is taken out easily. Strife then forcefully opens up Apocalypse's healing chamber and commands him to rise. "Come to me as I came to you, a babe with the need for succor. Come, come!" he screams at Apocalypse as he slowly rises out of the liquid. "Who are you?" asks the Blue Warrior God, his voice breaking as he gathers his bearings. "As you are the devil of yesterday who haunts my tomorrows. I am the demon of tomorrow who has come for cold retribution. I am Strife. Remember it, for that is the name of the man who is going to kill you." Strife's origins. Before we move on with the story and catch up with Strife and Apocalypse's battle, we'll need to go over Strife's origin. X-Cutioner song teases his origins but never delves into it. However, to understand Strife's motivations and revenge, we need to understand his origins and where he's coming from. So, let's get into it. For Strife's origins, we'll need to travel into the future, the late 37th and early 39th century. During this time, Earth was being ruled by Apocalypse, who had survived this long by switching hosts and transferring his consciousness into various bodies. Mother Ascani, an old and aged mutant, aka Rachel Summers, was the leader of the Ascani cult, a religious band of rebels opposing Apocalypse's rule. Due to her age and the everlasting rule of Apocalypse over the Earth, Mother Ascani needed a powerful mutant that could lead the rebellion in her stead. This leads her to sending Sister Ascani, aka Jen Ascani, to the past to find a worthy successor. Jen sacrificed her physical body to become pure energy, so she could travel back in time to when the X-Men were still alive. The time Sister Ascani chose was the time when the Dark Riders were attempting to capture and kidnap Scott and Jean's son, Nathan Summers. Nathan was rescued by the X-Factor, but upon his retrieval, dread befell the X-Men. Apocalypse had infected infant Nathan with a technorganic virus, which was causing his body to rapidly transform. If the infant wasn't cured or the virus wasn't stopped, Nathan would die. This is when Sister Ascani arrived on the scene and took Nathan back to her time period, where Nathan could be cured and the virus could be stopped using Future's technology. Sadly, the only downside to this was that Jean and Scott would never be able to see their son again. But when Sister Ascani reached the future with Nathan, the dire circumstances surrounding Nathan's survival only grew further. Mother Ascani was informed by her technicians that the only thing keeping child Nathan alive was an electromagnetic field deployed by the remnants of the X-Factor's ship and its AI. This is the same AI that's currently with Cable and is known as the Professor. In actuality, the AI is millennia old and was created by a Celestial. Mother Ascani feared that little Nathan won't be able to survive for long, which is why she clones him. Clone is then put under accelerated growth until he's Nathan's age. The Ascani also managed to reduce the virus's infection in the clone during this process. But this is when Mother Ascani is informed that despite initial assessments, Nathan would also manage to survive. All this while Apocalypse in the future has been going from body to body like fodder. How long he's lived has greatly reduced how long he can survive in a host body. This is why Apocalypse has been searching for a worthy host that would be able to hold his consciousness long enough. This is when he learns about Nathan and decides to attack the Ascani stronghold to kidnap him. During this attack and attempt to kidnap Nathan, before Mother Ascani is killed, she orders one of her followers, Boak, to hide the children. Sadly, Boak is only able to hide Nathan, and Apocalypse manages to kidnap the clone. Apocalypse believes the clone to be the real Nathan Summers, the child he infected during the current X-Men timeline. He decides to raise the clone as Nathan with the intention of turning him into a worthy host so that once Apocalypse's current host is old and feeble, he can transfer his consciousness into the clone. And this is when Apocalypse names the kidnapped clone Strife. And so, Strife is born. Strife was a cruel and arrogant boy from the beginning, something Apocalypse encouraged. When Strife was 8 years old is when he first encountered Nathan, who had now adopted the last name Dayspring. They met at Apocalypse's citadel, where the rebellion was trying to destroy Apocalypse's virus. This is when the two first fought, and surprised by their resemblance, Strife was defeated by Nathan. Years later, when Apocalypse's current form gives way, he decides to transfer his consciousness into Strife. All these years, despite claiming the child, Apocalypse's aide, Xavier, has been the one taking care of Strife. So, before the transfer, when Apocalypse finally learns Strife is a clone, Xavier betrays his master, which also happens to be the time when Nathan infiltrates the scene with his parents Jean Grey and Cyclops. Apocalypse is killed during this battle, and Strife's life is spared. If you're curious how Jean and Scott arrived in the future, then we'd like you to check out our video on Strife's origins on our sister channel, Marvelous Videos, which will be linked below in the description. Now, back to the story. After this skirmish, Strife goes into hiding with Xavier, while the power gap left by Apocalypse's death is filled with new Canaanites and scions of Apocalypse, a new dictatorship. While hiding, Strife realizes that he was a clone and of what Apocalypse had done to him. This drove Strife insane. He insisted that he was the real Nathan instead, and Dayspring was the clone. During this time, he comes across Adam Unit 0, a prototype created and discarded by the Ascani clan. He reactivates Zero, but doesn't restore his speech functions. From now on, Zero serves Strife loyally and becomes his most trusted ally and bodyguard. Xavier has been growing wary of Strife during this time and attempts to assassinate the boy, believing him to be evil incarnated. Strife, however, captures and tortures Xavier and finally kills him when he warns the Ascani tribe of Strife's impending attack. Sadly, Strife still attacks the clan and wipes out most of them. He then brings Madame Sanctity aboard his ship, the last surviving member of Ascani clan. She decides to mentor Strife after sensing a similar psi signature in his mind to Nathan's. This is when Strife starts wearing his iconic armor, along with his helmet, and takes on the mantle of Chaos Bringer. Nathan Dayspring, meanwhile, has grown to be the leader of his own rebellion against the dictatorship called the Clan Chosen. During this rebellion, Nathan and Strife fight each other multiple times, growing into bitter enemies with each skirmish. Nathan, however, is unaware that Strife is his clone because of the armor, and years later, when Nathan went back to the past, Strife followed. Strife exchanged his future technology for mutants which he could turn into an army. And long story short, Strife does manage to change the timeline. Almost, until Nathan wins and has Strife's memories of this ever happening erased. Strife would later again attack Nathan, wounding his world severely. Nathan loses his wife to death and his son Tyler to Strife. Strife brainwashes Nathan's son and uses him against him. These skirmishes lead to Tyler's actions, forcing his father Nathan to shoot him. Eventually, Nathan's armies would defeat Strife and in a last-ditch attempt, flee to the current time, the 20th century. Upon his arrival, Strife became a terrorist and later would go on to establish the MLF. As the MLF leader, he'd have a few more skirmishes with Nathan, tasting defeat each time. During one of these skirmishes, Strife removes his mask and shows his face to Cable from the future. This is when Strife's true identity is revealed to Nathan. His ego battered after so many skirmishes, Strife decides to plan revenge on everyone that ever wronged him. And this is when the X-Cutioner song is sung. Now let's get back to the story and see how Strife exacts revenge on Apocalypse, his supposed father who raised him only to be slaughtered for his own gain. X-Force 17, Sleeping with the Enemy. At the Temple Pyramid in Bani Maza, Strife towers over Apocalypse and says with an evil grin on his face,
"The time has come, Apocalypse. The devil to come must pay his due to the devil who made him. Pay me, Master of Time, and let death be the coin of exchange."
When Apocalypse says that he owes Strife nothing, memories of his childhood flood back in and Strife punches Apocalypse across the room, enraged. Strife believes Apocalypse to be the reason for everything that's gone wrong in his life. He continues to punch Apocalypse through walls and debris, throwing the Blue Warrior God across the room like a rag doll, all the while blaming him for the past. Apocalypse writhes in pain on the ground as Strife bends down and taunts him.
"How long has it been since you cried a babe's tears of needs? Since you longed for the gentle warmth of a mother's touch? Do you want to know how long it's been for me?"
He continues laughing like a maniac and says,
"It's been forever. A forever solitude brought on by you, father of pain, son of the morning fire."
Apocalypse tries to escape, but Strife doesn't know he's headed for the teleporter. He stalks and follows his prey eagerly, and finally picks up Apocalypse and drops him on his head. Apocalypse finally uppercuts Strife from the ground, knocking his helmet away. Apocalypse won't go down at the hands of an unknown enemy, but confusion only grows as he sees Cable's face staring right back at him, and shock covers Apocalypse's face. Strife then takes out a sword and thrusts it into Apocalypse's chest, and as the Blue Warrior God stares down, he realizes it's the same blade Apocalypse once used to kill him, kill Strife. Apocalypse falls back in shock, and thankfully for him, he falls in the transport matrix, which is activated instantly.
"No!"
screams Strife as he watches Apocalypse vanish into thin air. He wonders for a minute if the Blue Warrior God will survive. However, being the egomaniac that he is, he's soon convinced that Apocalypse is dead. He puts on his helmet, straightens himself up, and turns around to face the Dark Riders. Now that Strife has defeated Apocalypse, he's now the ultimate survivor of their species. Thus, the Dark Riders will now follow and be loyal to Strife. Now, up in space at Grey Malkin, Bishop and Wolverine look out at the window, with Bishop questioning his existence, how everything has now been put into perspective for him. From here, so much that bothers Bishop seems so insignificant to him. On the other hand, the 5'3" Wolverine lights a cigarette and says,
"At my size, Bishop, I put everything in a perspective. Besides, I don't need this for you to teach me about my insignificance. Life's done a fine job of that lately."
Wolverine is warned by Cable to put out the lit cigarette, but before Wolverine can do that, the AI detects it and shoots a foam-based fire extinguisher directly at Wolverine's face. Wolverine is angrier than ever, and Cable simply asks him to understand the circumstances and that he shouldn't blame the professor. In the future, smoking is considered a very dumb choice. He leads them toward the central briefing room where the three of them can continue the investigation when Bishop calls Strife a terrorist. But he's much more than that, as Cable goes on to explain. More than a terrorist, Bishop, more a force for anarchy, born and bred for chaos, but desperately trying to find a sense of order. They reach their intended destination and Cable asks the professor to brief them on Strife. The computer beeps and the professor's voice echoes through Grey Malkin accompanied by relevant holographic footage. Strife, real name unknown, age unknown, status self-proclaimed anarchist and fomentor of political dissent. Nor-Am Pact region, circa 3783-3806 AD. Strife has participated in acts of aggression against the both controlling rulers, the High Lords of New Canaan, as well as the rebellion forces known as the Clan Chosen. December 25, 3806. Canaanites defeated the remnants of the Mao Sino Province Pact, thereby consolidating the control of global forces. In an effort to maximize potential for anarchistic endeavors, Strife and Displacement Unit, designated 0, fled to current temporal zone, circa 1983 AD. Cable then tells Bishop and Wolverine how he encountered Strife 8 years ago and knew instantly that he was also a man out of time. How his last encounter left him baffled when Strife removed his helmet and revealed his identity. How Strife has traveled back to the past to kill the mutant rebellion in infancy, while Cable is here to ensure that it happens in an orderly fashion. Wolverine lights up another cigarette, this time with the middle claw of his right hand already unsheathed, and he says, but it doesn't answer the obvious question. Why are you and him walking around with the same face? And as Grey Malkin's AI tries to put out his cigarette, Wolverine slices down the protruding pipe supposed to spray the extinguishing foam instantly. Down on Earth, on the East Coast, X-Factor and the X-Men are busy recovering from the recent skirmish with the MLF. Rogue, Gambit and Quicksilver are in rough shape, with all three of them being out for the upcoming battle. Rogue has been hit the worst. Stephanie's worried about her retinas as determining how much damage was done to them while she's unconscious is impossible. Boomer isn't doing good either, as Skids broke her jaw, and speaking, something she loves to do a lot, is now a challenge for her. Sam kisses her on the cheek lovingly, offering her some respite, and walks out of there accompanied by Alex. Alex wants Sam to check up on his X-Force members. They've all been growing agitated with each passing minute. The two split up with Alex headed for the control room while Sam heads to the danger room. In the control room, Alex is only met with more bad news. The virus has taken over Charles's entire outer body and will soon target his internal organs. In a last-ditch attempt to save the Professor, Hank and Moira have decided to target the core, the point of contact where the virus first entered his body. Valerie, Aurora and Alex watch on from the control room as Hank operates on the Professor, with Moira watching it all virtually through a video call. This is a desperate move, but desperate is all they have at their disposal right now. Back in the danger room, we see that Rain is doing her best to keep the X-Force company as she talks with Richter and Sunspot. She doesn't want any bad blood between them, but it's too late for that. Despite the two of them having joined the X-Force only a few weeks ago, they hate that they're being punished for something Cable did. Rain gives up and faces away from the imprisoned members and says, "Perhaps I can't see who's wrong and who's right anymore. Perhaps there's no difference at all." This irks Sunspot a lot as he grimly replies, "Oh, there is a difference all right, Pumpkin. Just depends on which side of the bars you're on." On the other side of the danger room, Siren, aka Teresa Cassidy, is having the worst day of her life. She's in a fit, as Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man, doesn't seem to remember her. After all the time they spent together, after all the moments they shared together, this is just appalling to her. Turns out Teresa spent all these precious moments with a duplicate of Jamie, not the real him. And to the real Jamie, all the time they spent together is like a movie. He remembers it, but feels nothing for it in his heart. And this breaks Siren's heart. She doesn't want to talk to him anymore. And, who can blame her? Thankfully, Sam enters the room at this point to lighten things up and lift the spirits of his squad. But the interim leader has been away for too long. The task at hand is tougher than he suspects. "How are you all holding up?" he asks them, and they all look at him in resentment, unable to hide their emotions. Only Sunspot is able to utter words, and they too are laden with resentment as he says, "Fine, Sam. Just fine." Back at Strife's base, the Chaos Bringer sternly walks back to Jean and Scott's temporary prison and demands an interior view of it from his AI. He sees Jean and Scott huddled together in terror as he removes his helmet. The AI informs him that their condition is normal. Strife is just checking up on them. He puts his helmet back on and leaves, but that's when they both spring to their feet, ready for action. Jean and Scott have finally managed to put two and two together. It wasn't the room dampening their powers all this while, it was Strife and his widely superior mutant powers. Jean managed to probe Forearm's mind earlier and source the access code to their cell. She uses her telekinetic ability to unlock their cell, and Scott and Jean run out of it, holding hands. Scott's worried that if Strife can hold Jean's powers at bay, then there's no way they can fight him, not without losing their lives. Back in New York, outside the mansion, the air sizzles with static electricity as a large energy portal opens up in the sky and directly shoots a beam at the mansion, exploding its front wall. Polaris, Archangel, Colossus and Iceman spring to action as soon as they hear the loud boom, suspecting an attack. But they don't know what hit them. Is it a missile? They reach the front door and watch in horror as the entire lobby is engulfed in energy particles. Polaris, despite her broken jaw, stands guard alongside her team members when a raspy and ragged voice echoes in the mansion.
"The one who is here is either fool or aggressor."
Archangel can't believe his eyes as he seethes with anger. It's Apocalypse. His body broken and his skin steaming from the recent teleportation. Apocalypse revels in the fact that one of his greatest creations, Archangel, not only survives, but has anger coursing through his veins, even if it is at the sight of Apocalypse himself. All of the X-Men launch themselves at Apocalypse, unaware of his recent fight with Strife. Warren, however, can't stand the sight of Apocalypse, and even though he's flying toward Apocalypse at incredible speeds, he shoots poison blades from his metal wings at him. But the Blue Warrior God is too fast. Apocalypse brings up his arm in front of his face, letting each blade sink into it without a flinch. Apocalypse then lowers his head in disappointment. Even though the Egyptian mutant would love to fight the X-Men and die or survive triumphantly, he's here for a different reason.
I come to end this game, and that means defeating the madman who hurt us all. And the only way to accomplish that is we battle Strife together.
Uncanny X-Men number 296, Crescendo. Back at Strife's base, Jean and Scott's escape plan has gone horribly wrong. A damaged and crippled Scott holds Jean's limp body in his arms as he screams, "Jean, what have you done to her? What have you done?" He's addressing Strife's mutants and Dark Riders as he's surrounded by them. Tusk screams at him that the Dark Riders did what they were supposed to do, and Jean's death was only collateral damage. They're here to take Scott back to his cell and Jean to the morgue. But Scott isn't having any of it. He bawls with rage as he removes his visor and lets loose. His unconstrained optic blasts color the entire room red. Each Dark Rider is sent flying away, incapacitated. It's then that Scott's eyes turn red and no more optic blasts surge from them. And it's then that Jean gives up the act. She's been controlling Scott's optic blast telekinetically all along. Scott puts on his visor and the two run out, trying to escape the maze of corridors. But suddenly, they're ambushed by Mainframe, another one of Apocalypse's henchmen. This puzzles Scott as he wonders why they're all now serving Strife. Mainframe is no match for Scott and Jean's powers. Scott blasts him and then Jean hurls him away. She then uses a telekinetic rope to swing away with Scott in her arms. He kisses the love of his life as the two seem to be finally catching a break. Back in Strife's headquarters, we see the Chaos Bringer watching Jean and Scott's escape unfold intently. Zero looks at him inquisitive about the unfolding events, but Strife doesn't flinch. This is all a part of his plan. In Salem Center, New York, at the X-Mansion, Beast has managed to get to the source of the virus. It's a futuristic slug, and he stares at it intently through a portable microscope attached to his eye. But sadly, extracting the slug has been useless. The virus still continues to take over Xavier's body with the same pace. Meanwhile, Moira has been busy breaking the virus's binary code, and it hasn't yielded much either, only a taunt by Strife. She shows them the encoded image, which is Strife's evil face, and plastered on top of it are the words, "You're smart, but I am smarter." This enrages Beast, who wishes he could get his hands on Strife, and that's when Polaris chimes in and says that he just might get a chance to do that, as Wolverine, Bishop, and Cable are now working together to track him down. Despite the positive thought, deep inside her heart, Polaris knows that those three won't hold back and wait for them if they manage to track Strife down. High above the Earth in Grey Malkin, Bishop and Wolverine have been using Cable's Hollow program to go over all the happenings that have happened till now. The Professor's assassination, Jean and Scott's kidnapping, the unknown reason for Mr. Sinister's intervention, and the assassination attempt on Apocalypse's life. They've also learned from the Gold Team in the X-Mansion that Apocalypse never ordered his Horsemen to capture Jean and Cyclops. They're putting the pieces together. Strife's plan stripped Cable from his X-Force, stripped Apocalypse from his Horsemen, and left the X-Men without their vital assets, Xavier, Jean, and Cyclops. Bishop comes to the conclusion that once they find out the connection between all these moves, they'll be able to nail down Strife easily. Back at Strife's base of operations, Jean and Scott are still navigating the maze of corridors trying to find a way out, growing more confused about Strife with each passing second. Strife blames them for something that happened in his past. This confuses them even more because he's much older than them. The two are still unaware that Strife has traveled back from the future, but their confusion soon stops when they turn a corner and come across an infant mechanically infused to Strife's base. Meanwhile, in New York, at the X-Mansion, Apocalypse lies dormant, healing and recovering from his recent battle with Strife. When he's finally healed sufficiently enough, he wakes up to find Havoc and Storm standing guard, ready to strike him down in case he tries something unexpected. But the Blue Warrior God instead has every intention of negotiating. He meant it when he said that the X-Men and him need to battle Strife together. "Why do you believe you're of any use to us?" asks Storm, to which Apocalypse grins and replies,
"Because I can save your sacred Xavier."
Storm has a glimmer of hope in her eyes, but she still doesn't want to trust Apocalypse. He then points out that half of the X-Men have been injured in the recent battle with MLF, while the ones that can help have been imprisoned, the X-Force. Sam, who stands behind Alex and Storm, isn't having any of this. He doesn't believe that Apocalypse can save the Professor and is simply bluffing. But that's when Archangel steps in. He spreads his new metal wings courtesy of Apocalypse in defiance and vouches for the Blue Warrior God. Despite his ardent hatred for Apocalypse, he's seen what the ancient mutant is capable of. He remembers Apocalypse infecting Nathan, Scott and Jean's son, with a virus similar to the one used on Xavier. "I am living testimony to his genius, twisted or otherwise. He may be Charles's only hope." They don't want to trust Apocalypse, but they all trust Archangel. If Archangel believes in Apocalypse's abilities, then there's no need for any more question. They begin to escort Apocalypse to Charles's chamber, keeping a close eye on him. Apocalypse is intrigued by Archangel. He wants to know that despite Warren's hatred for him, why did he vouch for Apocalypse? Why didn't Archangel choose to kill him in his current weakened state and fulfill his deepest desire? "When I do kill you,
And rest assured I will. It'll only be after you've suffered the way I've suffered. It'll be a time and place of my choosing, not simply because an opportune situation has presented himself. And this doesn't scare Apocalypse. It only makes him smile. He's now more than sure that he made the correct choice when choosing his fourth horseman, Death. High up above on the Grey Malkin, Bishop has finally had an idea, and Wolverine agrees with him. Maybe they haven't found Strife yet because he's hiding somewhere obvious. Somewhere neither the X-Men nor Apocalypse would think to search. He's hiding right under their noses. Bishop, still a bit unfamiliar with current day, suspects it could either be the mansion or Grey Malkin. But Cable corrects him by stating that either Cerebro or his AI, the Professor, would have detected Strife instantly if that was the case. This leaves only one place in Wolverine's mind, Apocalypse's base of operations. He commences a gene scan the very next second on both of Apocalypse's base of operations, Egypt and California. Back at Strife's base of operations, Jean and Scott have discovered the unthinkable. Scott stares at the baby in disbelief while Jean stares at it intently, her eyes gleaming with motherly instincts. Scott can't believe what Jean's saying, but it's true. Jean knows who it is. She can sense the child's thought patterns as tears stream down her face. Despite the impossibility, despite what Sister Ascani had told them, he's here. It's their son, Nathan Summers. The family's reunion is short-lived as their suspicions come true. Strife's holographic face bursts onto the screen behind them, screaming in anger. This is another one of his twisted games. Strife goes on to tell them that infant Nathan's mind has been genetically linked to his, and the mechanical appendages he's connected to intertwines the baby with the life support system of the entire complex. This leaves Scott and Jean powerless. They can't stop Strife without hurting Nathan in the process. And that's when Strife's large holographic face offers them a choice. You have the opportunity to rid the world of Dark Riders, this apocalyptic tomb of pain and misery, and me. You can do that by simply destroying the child. Jean and Scott scream at his holographic face with rage and horror. They can never destroy their own child, but Strife tries to be nice. He gives them 30 seconds to make the choice. Strife then shuts down the communication, and we see him gloating from his throne back at the headquarters. There should be no doubt that they would sacrifice the life of the child simply to save themselves. My death an added incentive. I can guarantee they'd do this and more. For you see, this has happened once before. Scott and Jean desperately poke and prod at the machinery to try and find a way to save the infant, but there's nothing they can do. Strife is right. If they attempt to detach infant Nathan from the complex, then he'd die instantly. They're helpless, and so they decide to surrender in order to save their baby. But that's when an energy blast hits Scott straight in the chest. It's Gauntlet and the other Dark Riders. Along with Strife's holographic face, surrendering is not a choice they get to make. They can either kill the child and rid the world of Strife and the Dark Riders, or face their deaths at the hands of the charging foes. But this is when Strife's delusion slowly starts breaking back in his headquarters. Zero again looks at him with concern, unable to speak, but his look mimics the one he gave Strife earlier when Jean and Scott first made their escape. They're fighting back, says a surprised Strife as he stares at the monitors in front of him. He's spent his entire life hating Jean and Scott, believing himself to be the real Nathan, believing that his parents abandoned him as a child. But all that is now slowly crumbling as he sees them fight for their and Nathan's lives. Seeds of doubt are now sown in his mind. His face visibly grows angrier and angrier with each passing second. Jean and Scott, meanwhile, are done fighting the Dark Riders. There's only one way to save infant Nathan without sacrificing or surrendering themselves, and so, without a second thought, they both leap off the walkway and plunge into the abyss below. Jean is ready to say her last goodbye, but Scott has other plans. Scott plans to blast the wall, and Jean will use her telekinetic rope to aid in their escape. Scott fires an optic blast, but before Jean can form a rope using her powers, the two of them are sucked into the hole. It's a vacuum yanking them outside. But how can this be? Back at the Grey Malkin, Wolverine, Bishop, and Cable are busy pondering over the clues as the gene scan at both of Apocalypse's bases has come back negative. Where could Strife be hiding? Cable, frustrated and seething with anger by now, shouts, "Where on earth could they be?" And that's it. That's what helps Wolverine piece everything together as he screams, "That's it! It's why Jeannie hasn't been able to reach any of us psychically. They're in the last place X-Factor battled Apocalypse. Don't you see, people? They're not on Earth at all." X-Factor 86. One of these days, we see the X-Men back at the X-Mansion stunned by what they're hearing as Wolverine continues to inform them about Scott and Jean's location, the moon. But Aurora, like the others, is quite confused. How can Wolverine be so sure that Jean and Scott are on the moon, that Strife's base is on the moon? But Wolverine's adamant. Every inch of his fiber is telling him that they're on the moon. And with Strife attacking Apocalypse before the Blue Warrior God could search for him, only strengthens his belief. It wouldn't be surprising if he were operating out of Pokey's last known major HQ, namely Luna. Plus, the distance would explain why Jean's been having trouble sending a broadcast. Wolverine then continues to tell them about the faint voice he heard moments ago, in his mind, picked up by his subconscious mind, disclosing to everyone that he's the only other guy, other than Scott, that Jean has ever felt close to. It's why her voice reached him. It could be her last cry for help. And he's right, because on the moon, Jean and Scott are in dire circumstances, desperate for air and freezing to death with each passing second. The Earth looms in the distance, and although beautiful, it will likely be the only witness to their demise. Jean's skin begins to crack around her mouth as Scott offers her his hand. His veins strain with each move as he struggles to hold his breath, but sadly, they can't move, not until a sudden pocket of air surrounds the two, offering some momentary relief. But how and where did this pocket of air come from? Jean struggles to breathe, and Scott asks her to breathe slowly. They need to maximize the amount of time they get to live from this limited amount of air. And in the distance, we see Strife. He's the one responsible for the pocket of air around them. Strife looks on menacingly as he slowly approaches them from a distance. Back on Grey Malkin, Wolverine tells Storm that he, Bishop, and Cable will make their way to the moon right now, while she and the other X-Men can soon follow them after taking care of Xavier. Storm, however, shoots this idea down immediately. They don't know Strife's powers, nor what horrors await them at the moon, if it is indeed Strife's base. She doesn't want them getting captured and becoming a liability in the process. But Cable isn't having any of this. He interrupts them instantly. The man from the future is hungry for blood, and there's no way he's going to let this chance of facing Strife get away from him. And if Wolverine and Bishop try to stop him, he'll fight them with everything he's got. After all, they're on Cable's turf. Storm reluctantly agrees to his terms and allows them to go to the moon first while she arranges transport for the X-Men back on Earth. Wolverine wants to body slide and transport to the moon immediately, but sadly the teleporter will need to be adjusted for the moon as it's currently calibrated for Earth. How long will that take? Asks Wolverine, and Cable replies, well, if I do it myself, about 20 to 25 minutes. This is when Bishop chimes in, and if we help, an hour and a half, is Cable's reply. You, wouldn't happen to have beer and a deck of cards around here, would you? Asks Wolverine casually as he walks away from Cable, leaving him to calibrate the body slide teleporter. Down on Earth, Alex and Storm lay out a plan for the upcoming battle. Although Wolverine's claims are far-fetched and hard to believe, they're all determined to go through with the plan anyways. This is when Storm and Alex pick out their team, which includes Psylocke, Archangel, Iceman, Polaris, and Cannonball. Beast reminds them that they'll need to take care of Xavier in case they might have forgotten about the Professor in haste. But no, they haven't. Archangel opens the door to lead them to Apocalypse, who's had enough rest by now to be ready to fix the Professor. But when he opens the door, he finds Strong Guy, Feral, and Multiple Man spying on them as they pretend to be nonchalant about it. Alex sighs and says, I can't take these guys anywhere. Up on the moon, covered in the darkness of space, stars shine brightly. Light years away as Strife towers over Jean and Scott. They're struggling to stand up to their feet due to the limited oxygen they have. Strife talks to them and tells them about the subcutaneous transmitters he implanted in their jaws when they were incapacitated. It's why they can hear him in the vacuum of space. With zero care for their well-being in mind, Strife begins his long-expected monologue. He claims how everything that's happened till now was planned by him, how he's been experimenting on Jean and Scott like mice, how the force field that surrounds them will just reflect Scott's optic blast, making it bounce around inside the sphere. And although Scott won't be affected by it, Jean will surely get hit and lose her life. What do you want from us already? What's the purpose of this sick exercise? Revenge? But why us particularly? Screams Jean at him, having had enough of Strife's torture. Scott stops her. He knows Strife's kind. Megalomaniacs. They do such cruelty, play such twisted games for no rhyme and reason. Scott doesn't know about Strife's delusions, doesn't know that the Chaos Bringer blames them for abandoning him as a child. And Scott's latest comment angers Strife immensely as he begins screaming, "You're so secure, Cyclops, always knowing that you're in the right, that in your purity you could never have done anything to bring this on yourself. Self-righteous fool, you destroy innocence." This outburst makes Jean suspicious. She suspects there's more to this twisted game and torture, more than Strife is letting on. But now, as time passes, her breathing becomes ragged. They're losing air in the force field faster than they'd anticipated. And Strife knows this. "But I'll tell you what, Cyclops, I'll offer you a chance. It is, after all, the least I can do. And in that respect, I take after you." Back in the X-Mansion, the X-Men approach Apocalypse, who's in much better shape now. Archangel's concern for his health seems to sway him, but then Warren tells the ancient mutant that he wants Apocalypse in top shape so that he can't make excuses later on, in case he can't help the Professor. The Angel of Death and the X-Men still doubt him, and Apocalypse says, "Haven't you realized it yet, son? Strife sought to kill me because he knew I could undo the techno-virus." Warren lets Apocalypse know that he isn't his son anymore, nor is he one of his Horsemen. Archangel plans to doubt Apocalypse at each step, for he won't let him get away this time, get away with any of his nasty tricks. They let him out and take him to Xavier. Hank and Moira stare at Apocalypse as he stands there, still as a rock. After a few minutes, Moira gets up and asks Apocalypse if he's going to help
or not. Finally, Apocalypse speaks and tells her that he's planning his strategy. This isn't something that can be rushed. Havoc and Archangel stand in anticipation, watching his every move like a hawk. Apocalypse bends down and lifts Xavier's arm. He then looks closely at his face. The virus has spread throughout Charles's entire body, from his cardiovascular system to his nervous system, and although he's beyond medical help, Apocalypse can cure him. He pulls out a cryptic device from his pocket and says, "All this procedure will require is this device, and approximately 90 seconds. Hank, who's been trying to fix the professor and save him for weeks, isn't pleased one bit. He wants to know what Apocalypse plans on doing. The ancient mutant, however, has no plans of disclosing the procedure to them. Well, at least not yet. He places the device on Charles's chest and presses it into his skin. The next moment, Charles clenches his teeth and lets out a blood-curdling scream, and as the professor opens his mouth, the virus's techno-organic cells come rushing out like some horrific, never-ending regurgitation. Hank's eyes widen as he realizes what Apocalypse is doing, but Archangel stands guard with his wings spread out wide. It's clear he'll let no one past him. The virus begins to envelop Charles's entire body and Apocalypse, as Warren says, "Let him do what he has to." Every X-Men watches in horror as Valerie doubts Archangel's actual plan and says, "Havoc, we've been had. Archangel's been taken over by Apocalypse again. He's out to destroy Xavier once and for all." But Archangel doesn't say anything, just stands vigil like a hawk. By now, on the moon, Strife has gone insane and is fully acting like a maniac. He is. The condition? The last chance he's offering to Jean and Scott. He wants them to beg. He wants them to beg like a child. The way an abandoned child would beg his parents to come back. The way someone with no hope, no source of love would beg. He wants them to scream from the top of their lungs that they want him, that they need him. He wants them to beg and tell him that there's no one more important in their lives at this moment than him. Strife is expunging every pain he's ever felt. This revenge is for every unfilled desire for a parent that he's ever had. Scott is conflicted. He can see Jean's breathing get heavier and ragged by each passing second, but he's a man of pride, of honor, and love. "Never. We don't trust you. We don't want your help. We'd rather die than throw ourselves on the mercy of someone like you." Saliva drips from the side of Cyclops' mouth as he strained for oxygen by his last words. He finally falls to the ground with a loud thud, and a cloud of moon dust rises and surrounds him. But Strife won't let him die so easily. He removes his helmet and screams, "Look at me! Look at me! Look at what denials and cruelty you've done to me! Look, look! I order you!" Tears stream down Strife's face as he screams one last time, "I order you!" But Jean and Cyclops have passed away. They lie motionless in the force field created by him. By now, on the Grey Malkin, Cable is finished calibrating the body slide transport, and the trio can finally leave for the moon. On Earth, in the X-Mansion, meanwhile, tensions are on the rise as the virus swallows Apocalypse and Xavier whole. They're gone, and Aurora gives Archangel her last warning. He has 2 seconds to move before every one of them unleashes their powers at him. It's then that Warren speaks for the first time, asking Aurora to not interfere with the process. They'll end up screwing things up. Inside the virus's growing infection, Charles screams one last time and then falls to the floor. The virus seems to vanish the very next second, and there's a mysterious alien-looking bug instead. A bug that's instantly crushed under Apocalypse's heel. Charles is devoid of any signs of the infection, though he seems to be strained considering the bulging veins across his entire body. It's then that the Blue Warrior God explains what happened. Apocalypse accelerated the virus's growth to the point where its power to replicate itself could not keep up, and as the virus feeds on biological matter, Xavier was no longer a viable source of sustenance, which is why the virus tried to latch onto Apocalypse. And sadly for the virus, Apocalypse can control every molecule of his body, which is why he was unpalatable to it, forcing it to transform into a techno-organic bug so it could search for other sources of food. The bug that Apocalypse crushed beneath his feet moments ago. Storm can't believe it and says, "Apocalypse, thank you. You have our gratitude, if not our trust. Now, we have to get to Jean and Scott." And turns out Apocalypse can help with that too. He has access to a spacefaring vessel that can take them to the moon. This makes the X-Men indebted to the Blue Warrior God as he does his best to lead them to the moon quickly. Back on Luna, Apocalypse's base on the moon, Cable manages to silently bodyslide the trio into the storage facility to avoid any unwanted confrontations. Bishop and Cable face Wolverine, asking about a strategy, but it's already too late. Logan wants them to turn around. They've already been discovered, and standing there alongside an army of henchmen are Barrage and Tusk's clones. So much for being stealthy. X-Men 16. Conflicting Cathyos. Below the surface of the moon, Wolverine, Bishop, and Cable have finally managed to find Strife's base. However, there's only a slight hiccup. They've walked into an ambush, just like Storm had suspected, and there seems to be no end to it. Although filled with rage and equipped to the brim, the trio can't seem to find a sliver of space as the sheer number of attacking henchmen and Dark Riders begin to overwhelm them. Wolverine, like always, has already given in to his rage and believes that he can slice his way through the henchmen and Tusk's mini-clones, no matter their numbers or size. Bishop and Cable, on the other hand, can see that they need a strategy, and that too quickly. But Wolverine isn't listening to them. He seems to be too caught up in one of his berserker rages. That's when Logan responds. He isn't wasting time arguing about what they should do while he has so many enemies to slice through. Suddenly, Logan is ambushed by Barrage, who shoots him with his forearms that turn into guns at point-blank range. This injures Logan immensely and sends him flying into a nearby wall. Bishop and Cable quickly form a protective perimeter around him as Logan tries to get up, but he's too injured. His costume is tattered, his ribs broken, and his lungs punctured. Logan will need some time to wait for his healing factor to kick in, time that the trio doesn't have. As Bishop and Cable ponder upon their impending death by the time Logan is healed, a voice from behind them takes them by surprise. Death isn't an option you should be considering today, Cable. As always, the X-Men fight together, and they fight for life. Cable and Bishop turn around, and they can't believe their eyes. The X-Men are here. Storm, Apocalypse, Psylocke, Archangel, Iceman, Havoc, Polaris, and Cannonball. All of them have been waiting for this opportunity for weeks to let go of their anger, their grief, their resentment, everything that's weighed them down since the assassination attempt on Charles. And this time, none of them plans on holding back. Strife watches intently as the fight rages on in the storage locker from his headquarters. Although things aren't going according to his plan anymore, it seems they're still going in the direction that he wants them to. He watches intently as each of the X-Men plow through his henchmen and Dark Riders easily. He watches on as Foxbat and Gauntlet carry away an incapacitated Barrage and says, "Quite predictably, they rout my forces. But how can they fight the inevitability of time? How can they stop the turning of the day, the crashing of the waves? How can they defeat me when I am there tomorrow?" Zero stands guard vigilantly behind him, watching the events unfold in front of him. Strife gets up and makes his way out of headquarters, and Zero follows him. Surprisingly, in a rare instance of vulnerability, Strife appreciates Zero, for he always listens to what the Chaos Bringer has to say, albeit it's because Zero can't speak. But maybe this is the reason Strife never restored his speech function all those years ago in the future. We see Strife has saved Scott and Jean, but for how long? He picks them up using his extensive telekinetic powers and generates a force field around them. He then uses his powers to melt the walls of Apocalypse's base easily. The force field now envelops him as well, and he walks out onto the surface of the moon. Jean is scared and horrified by the extent of Strife's powers as he says, "A little family stroll will do us all a world of good." Where are you taking us?" asks Jean, and Strife says, "Why, to the end mistress of the future storm and father misery, to the bitter end." Back on Earth, in the X-Mansion, Henry's busy looking after Charles, who's been unconscious since Apocalypse's radical treatment. Henry makes his 7th log entry into the treatment, and we get to know how Charles is doing. His fever is steadily dropping. His REM sleep cycle is slowly improving, and Hank has high hopes for his body to be in tip-top shape very soon. However, he's worried about Charles's mind, and we see Charles unconscious with an expression of agony plastered all over his face. Back up in space on Strife's moonbase, the X-Men have managed to take care of Strife's henchmen without a hiccup. Pressing matters still need to be addressed. First and foremost, they need to find and rescue Jean and Scott. Then they need to take care of the Dark Riders so that they don't interfere when they confront Strife. Alex quickly splits the X-Men into 2 different teams so they can start looking for Jean and Scott immediately. Cannonball, Polaris, Cable and him will be the Alpha team, while Psylocke, Wolverine and Storm will be the Beta team. And although Apocalypse has assisted them all this while, he'll fight this battle his own way, alone. For him, every battle since his birth has been this way. Survival of the fittest. It's what made him the Blue Warrior God, and he isn't backing down from this philosophy anytime soon. This leaves Archangel, Bishop and Iceman to form the Delta team by proxy. Iceman and Archangel take to the air while Bishop cocks his gun and acts as the solo ground support unit. Wolverine has managed to track down the scent of 4 of the Dark Riders, which stops beside a locked door. Psylocke, on the other hand, has been using her telepathic powers to look for Strife, to no avail. She's dead certain that the Chaos Bringer is masking his mind from any kind of probing, but she can sense faint residual energy of Scott's mind behind the locked door, though she should be sensing Jean as well, but this time she only senses Scott. Psylocke manages to grab the code to the locked door telepathically and unlocks it while preparing herself and her teammates for every possible situation that could be waiting for them behind the door. Whoosh! The door opens and vacuum begins to suck them all away. Aurora, Logan and Betsy are all under the danger of being thrown onto the lunar surface against their will. Storm desperately tries to control the air to prevent Wolverine and Psylocke from flying to their demise as Psylocke grabs the keypad and closes the door. Storm then radios into the rest of the team. Beta unit reporting in. We've ascertained Scott and Jean's location. Strife took them out on the surface of the moon. The Beta team, Cannonball, Havoc, Cable and Polaris are at a loss for ideas as they rush through the corridors desperately trying to think of a way to chase after Strife to rescue Jean and Scott. But Sam's mind has been riddled with other thoughts. Not only has his mentor Cable been absent for the past month, He didn't even bother to contact Sam or clear his name when the professor was shot. He stops Cable by placing his hand on Cable's shoulder, and Dayspring replies, "Later, Sam." But the young leader isn't having any of it. "There's no more later between us. We talk now." Sadly for Sam, this isn't the time and place for it, especially with Havoc and Polaris, the two heads of the X-Factor, watching. Sam lets it go when Cable suggests using Apocalypse's ship to chase after Strife on the lunar surface. They can't use Cable's bodyslide transporter as it's run out of energy when it was calibrated to penetrate Strife's base's shields. Somewhere else in Strife's base, in a dark and dimly lit corridor, Apocalypse stumbles his way toward his demise. Despite having had enough time to heal, curing Xavier, flying to the moon has taken a toll on his body again, and he's now growing weaker and weaker with each passing second. As he turns a corner, he's faced by his past loyal disciples, the Dark Riders. They're now loyal to Strife and plan to take Apocalypse down as Gauntlet makes the group's intentions clear to the ancient mutant. "You made us. Now we unmake you. This completes the cycle you taught us to live by." But Apocalypse has too much pride. He believes in his philosophy too much. Instead of making the wise choice of escaping to fight another day, the Blue Warrior God leaps at his disciples, ready to fight to the death. Out on the lunar surface, the Alpha team is using Apocalypse's ship to look for Jean and Scott. Polaris and Havoc wonder how Cable can fly Apocalypse's ship, not knowing that Cable had adapted and derived his own tech from Apocalypse's technology. "So mysterious, isn't he?" says Polaris sarcastically, and Sam, who's still pissed off with Cable, chimes in, "Being mysterious is pretty much what Cable does best, and Cable has had enough." He quips back, "Listen, Sam, this attitude of yours has to go. What happened, happened. Understood? Do I have things to answer for?" "Yeah." "Is now the time to?" "No." "We'll talk once the mission is completed." Alex soon interrupts their disagreement as he spots a mysterious technological tower in the distance, the only other structure on the lunar surface. This is likely where Strife is hiding along with Jean and Scott. Back on Earth, Henry has finally relaxed and is taking a much-needed nap beside Charles, who's hooked up to tons of medical equipment to monitor his recovery. Rain walks in with refreshments for Henry, but seeing him fast asleep, decides to simply place them by his side. That's when Charles suddenly wakes up screaming, "Inside the machine! The virus did it! Inside the machine is a man!" Professor's mind has clearly been affected by the infection. Also, Hank thinks until Charles angrily screams at Hank and Rain to pay heed to his words. Although he was unconscious during all this time, the Professor's genius and unmatched telepathic powers were in full swing. He knows Scott, Jean, Strife and Cable are all linked to each other, and this is a grand scheme to bring them all crumbling to their knees. Up above the Earth's atmosphere on the lunar surface, the Alpha team has landed Apocalypse's ship and is now wearing armored spacesuits so that they can enter the tower and finally confront Strife face to face once and for all. But as they approach its perimeter, there's a huge explosion that knocks Polaris and Cannonball away. It's a grey force field, one that can't be detected by any scanners. Only Cable himself has managed to make it through. That is until he glances down and spots Alex, panting heavily, clearly affected by the grey force field's impact, but not enough to stop him from passing through. Polaris and Cannonball, on the other hand, have been knocked unconscious. Why the two of them? Cable wonders. Why were Alex and Cable the only ones to pass through the grey force field? And that's when Strife's voice echoes in Cable's ears. "Come on now, Nathan Dayspring. I'd have thought the answer to be obvious by now. Let's have a chat. You and I, my failed brother." And as Cable turns around, glimpses of time long gone and moments yet to come swirl around him. Jean and Scott stand with their arms spread out, wide in an angel pose, unable to move due to Strife's telekinetic control, a twisted scene reflecting the twisted mind of the Chaos Bringer. X-Force 18, Ghosts in the Machine. Cable has been waiting for this moment, waiting to face his adversary, someone that's chased and clawed at his being all his life, all his childhood. This man. Strife has never let him taste peace for long, and it's only been a year since he's learned why. It's because Strife is Cable's clone, but unlike Cable, he doesn't have to use most of his telepathic and telekinetic powers to keep the technorganic virus in his body at bay. "Strife, time's up," says Cable as he stands there ready for battle, his glittering and radiating yellow, like it does every time his emotions are heightened. Strife stands atop his time portal device as Cable stares up at him from the lunar surface. Like before, vital and important moments from time that have passed or are yet to come surround the entire area inside the force field. The X-Men's battle with the Sentinels, birth of Nathan Summers, Magneto's defiance, and more. Strife has been waiting for Cable in anticipation, waiting for this showdown. Now that he's taken care of the Ascani clan and traveled back in time, he's managed to subdue his supposed mother and fathers, Scott and Jean, too. The only piece to his twisted puzzle of revenge that remains is Cable, and time has come that he now faces off against his failed brother, who he believes to be his clone. Strife believes he's finally managed to control time, at least this time, exacting revenge on everyone that wronged him. Jean, Scott, Cable, Apocalypse, the Ascani clan, and everyone else. But Cable has been time traveling, correcting discrepancies for too long. He knows time can't be controlled. This angers Strife. After all that he's done, Cable is still right, which irks him enough to remove his helmet and throw it at Cable's feet.
Does that mean Scott Summers and Jean Grey should be forgiven for their trespasses?
But despite knowing the connection between them, this is the first time Cable is actually listening to Strife's deluded rumblings, what the Chaos Bringer actually believes, which is why Cable has no idea what he's talking about. And this is when the scenes around Strife change, depicting Nathan's handover to Sister Ascani so that she could take him to the future to save his life. Strife still believes that this is him, and Nathan's his clone as he screams,
"After all, you're nothing more than a scientific abomination. A failed attempt to preserve a life which didn't even need preserving."
Cable is tired and beyond angered by Strife's ramblings as he openly fires his large rifle and screams, "Stab your eyes! I'm a man. I'm my own man." The bullets hit Strife head-on without a single one missing their mark, causing him to fall from the platform as Cable runs toward him. But even as he falls, Strife is happy. He knows he's managed to strike a chord in Cable's heart. He's finally managed to get inside his head. And as the Chaos Bringer nears the lunar surface, he uprights himself using his telekinetic powers and slowly descends while continuing with his ramblings.
"Perhaps you realize deep inside that I am the whole of the sum of our parts, and you are nothing."
Cable stands in front of Strife, anger taking over the best of him as he screams,
"You son of a bitch!"
and tackles Strife to the ground. And even in this twisted state of defeat and chaos while time swirls around them, Strife can't help but agree with Cable's obscenities. After all, Scott and Jean are among the people he hates the most in this world. Scott and Jean are still immobilized with only their mouths free so that they can talk and watch as they stand witness like helpless angels with their arms spread out. They wonder what Cable alone can do against the madman Strife. Jean is however beginning to doubt if Strife is actually a maniac. Maybe his reasons for revenge run deeper than they previously anticipated. If they could only get to the bottom of it, maybe the two can talk him out of this twisted revenge. Back at Strife's lunar base, miles away, a mysterious spacecraft flies away as Wolverine, Psylocke and Storm realize what's happened. The Dark Riders have escaped before the Beta team or the Delta team could stop them. Wolverine can't take this anymore. They've always been a step behind as he begins slicing the base's computers left and right out of rage. Storm tries to calm him down as she asks Psylocke to scan for Apocalypse. The Blue Warrior God was the only one actively pursuing his former disciples. Psylocke can barely perceive Apocalypse's mind, and when she probes it, she realizes that he was overwhelmed by the Dark Riders in his weakened state. Apocalypse is dying. On the other corner of the moon base, a mile away, the Delta team, Iceman, Bishop and Archangel continue searching for the Dark Riders, still unaware that they've escaped the base. But that's when Psylocke contacts the trio and informs them of the Dark Riders' escape. The Beta team is preparing a skimmer craft so that they can escape the moon after rescuing Jean and Scott. Bishop and Iceman make haste and reach them as soon as possible, but Archangel decides to stay behind. He can smell the dying ancient mutant's blood and plans to pay him one last visit. Iceman desperately tries to stop Archangel, but he's already flown away. Bobby can't let his friend go, but he's dragged away by Bishop, knowing too well what Warren plans to do. Back outside Strife's time vortex on the lunar surface, Cannonball and Polaris have finally awakened, although they're quite shaken up from the explosion. The two watch in horror as Cable faces off against Strife all alone, dreading what'll become of Sam's former mentor.
"Away from me, Half-Life!"
screams Strife inside the force field as he punches Cable and sends him flying hundreds of feet away from him. Strife, still riding high on his emotions, tells Cable that he's watched Nathan all his life, through all the rebellions in their time, the future, and through all his renegade rebellions in the current time, wondering what fuels Nathan, and now Strife finally has the answer. He believes Cable is fueled and driven by desolation, isolation, by his own failures. But Cable isn't having any of it. If words could affect the man out of time, then he'd have died long ago. He takes out his knife and slices Strife across the chest as he gets up from the ground. Well, if Cable doesn't want to talk and fight, then a fight is what Strife will give him. Strife hits Cable directly in the chest at point-blank range with a telekinetic blast. And although the blast is enough to blow most of Cable's clothes away, it's not nearly enough to put the man from the future down. He stands there, menacingly staring at his foe, bare-chested, as we see half of his body covered by the technorganic virus. Back on Earth, Jubilee and Hank attend to Xavier, who's still in shock, dreading the lives of his X-Men. He tells them that while he was recovering from his fever, for a brief moment Charles was able to read everyone's mind on the moon, including Strife's. His mind is riddled with dreams and nightmares, hungry for revenge. And although the battle will come to an end soon, it'll come at a cost, a huge cost. And this cost will be the life of his beloved X-Men, Jean and Scott. Hank hears what the professor is saying as he helps the exhausted Xavier lie back down. Even though Beast trusts his beloved friend and what he fears, he still believes in all his comrades, the X-Men. Back on the lunar surface, inside the moon base which was once the base of operations of Apocalypse, now sees its former owner dragging himself across an abandoned corridor, leaving a trail of blood and bodily fluids in his wake. In his ramblings of a dying man, Apocalypse still believes in his philosophy, survival of the fittest, and this time he wasn't fit, so his death is now glory to him. That's when Archangel lands in front of him and Apocalypse looks up happily, hoping his former son, his former Horsemen, will grant him the sweet release of a glorious death. But Warren knows that this is what Apocalypse wants, and although the Blue Warrior God stripped him of his humanity, he's managed to get some of it back, and that's enough. He turns away from the dying ancient mutant and begins walking away as he says, Warren Worthington III didn't have to die just so the Archangel could live, any more than I need to kill you, Apocalypse, to find out what's alive inside me. Warren has learned this the hard way, but often revenge isn't the way it should be, and he's gonna let Apocalypse learn that the hard way. Apocalypse has his hand outstretched in a desperate attempt to reach Warren as he screams,
No, I deserve a clean death. I deserve to die as I lived, a man of strength and power, not like this.
Warren is long gone as Apocalypse dies slowly in a pool of his own blood. On the other side of the moon, miles away, inside the time vortex, Cable struggles to keep up with Strife as he gets kicked in the face and is sent flying away. Jean and Scott are still immobilized, but they can now move their heads, and Jean can use some of her power. It seems that the more Strife concentrates on Cable, the weaker their telekinetic bond becomes. Jean hopes that as this continues, she might be able to break them free so that they can help Cable, and help is what Cable desperately needs. Suddenly, the scales of power tip as Strife out of nowhere is hit by a huge plasma blast and is sent flying away. It's Alex, and he's managed to finally recover and join the fight. Strife lies on the ground with his armor blown away from the plasma blast as he realizes his mistake. He'd programmed the grey force field to allow the Summers bloodline through, but he didn't account for the fact that it would also allow Scott's brother Alex to come through. Strife still isn't pleased and he says,
It would appear that anyone who bears the name of Summers must pay for it, doesn't it?
Some pay with their lives.
You, Alex Summers, will pay with your death.
But that won't be the case as Strife screams out in pain when an optic blast hits him directly in the chest. Jean and Scott have managed to break free, and they plan to put an end to this cycle of pain and revenge. Jean, being the empath she is, tries to reach out to Strife's innocent side, offering him a chance to heal his wounds, together with the family. And this word together seems to snap Strife back to reality, but he can't trust them anymore. He fears he'll be betrayed again as he gets up from the ground and screams in anger. Strife wants to believe her words, but he's too consumed by his hatred, his anger, and his lust for revenge. He screams at the top of his lungs and lets out a huge telekinetic blast, rattling the foundations of the tower, creating the time vortex. By now, the rest of the X-Men have managed to reach their location as they feel the ground beneath them, fearing the worst for their fellow X-Men. Strife continues to writhe in anger as he uses his powers to dismantle the tower, failing to see that he never turned off the machinery. This causes tons of electromagnetic energy to build around them, putting everyone's lives at risk. The rest of the X-Men have no choice but to watch on from the outside in horror as Jean desperately tries to shield Scott and Alex from the debris and EM energy in a telekinetic shield. Cable crawls across the lunar surface, groaning with each move as he tries to reach a part of the tower familiar to him. The tower comes crumbling down behind him as Cable uses the technology in his arm and the debris he found on the ground to put together an unknown contraption. He knows he needs to put an end to this all, and there's only one way to do that. Despite Jean and Scott's screams and pleading, Cable doesn't enter the telekinetic shield. He instead throws a detonator towards Scott and his contraption is completed. The detonator's linked to Cable's arm as he tells Scott to hit the engage button at his signal. Cable, who now has half of his face blown away, exposing the metallic skeleton underneath it, turns towards Scott, Jean and Alex and looks at them one last time. The three of them desperately plead for him to stop, promising to find another way, but Cable doesn't listen. The man out of time knows this has gone on for far too long, and he needs to put an end to it. Strife, who's still busy dismantling the tower and causing destruction and chaos, doesn't see Cable coming as Nathan tackles him to the ground, screaming,
Time's up, pal.
The two begin battling again, besting the other's each and every move, seemingly stuck in a stalemate when Cable presses a button on his arm and his AI, the Professor, chimes in his head, auto-destruct sequence activated, T-minus 25 seconds. Jean and Scott recoil in horror and realize what he's going to do as Strife continues fighting Cable, managing to grab Nathan by the throat. Scott realizes that his self-destruction, combined with the time flux energies around them, will be enough to take Strife down, as Jean is unable to use her powers due to the same. As the sequence nears the 10-second mark, Cable lets Strife win as he screams for Scott to hit the button when it's time. Scott doesn't want to do it, but Cable is adamant. Hesitation takes the best of Scott, forcing Cable to scream,
Summers, for all our sakes, do it.
God forgive me, says Scott, as he pushes the button. Boom! With a loud explosion, a time vortex opens up, swallowing everything in sight: the debris, cable, Strife, and most of all the remaining parts of the tower. The vacuum of space drowns out any noise of destruction as the grey force field pulls away, but Jean can telepathically hear everything. Hear the dying screams of Cable and Strife. And once the electromagnetic storm is done, nothing remains in sight, only the telekinetic shield with Scott, Jean, and Alex inside as their fellow X-Men watch on with sorrow in their eyes. Jean and Scott had once again let go of their sons this time. And as the X-Cutioner song comes to an end, the tune of a new song begins down on Earth in Nebraska. In the lonely farmhouse, Gordon Lefferts, a scientist employed by Mr. Sinister, has finally managed to open the canister handed over to him by Zero in exchange for Jean and Scott as his employer looks over his shoulder in anticipation. Nothing. The canister is empty. Mr. Sinister curses his luck. He'd expected there to be 2,000 years of Summer's bloodline's genetic material, but Strife tricked him. Gordon coughs loudly as Mr. Sinister leaves the farmhouse, but none of them knows that this is the legacy Strife wanted to leave them, to leave the world after his death. Strife has just unleashed the legacy virus on Earth. If you've reached this point in the video, I'm taking for a fact that you love the X-Men. I suggest you also watch our long reads on the Onslaught Saga as well as the Age of Apocalypse.